This is Villain for All Seasons, Season 2, Episode 7. I'm Ben.
I'm Dan.
I'm Andrew.
I was wondering if we could just start off with what I know is the most important news of the week. And maybe not the most important news to our listeners or to the world at large, but I think the most important news to the hearts of the hosts and producers of this podcast is, boys, the top G is back. He is free,
Oh,
and he
yeah.
is at large in Florida with
Oh.
Tristan Tate.
It's great.
I thought you were talking about Cuomo. That's actually.
Dude, there's just a lot of alpha energy on the streets
Yeah.
these days. It's hard out
Yeah.
here.
I mean, Cuomo with the Tate brothers, dream collaboration,
Yeah.
obviously.
Dream running mates, dream ticket.
At least have them as advisors.
Yeah, Miami's a different type of sanctuary city now, giving
Yeah.
sanctuary to the Tate
Yeah.
brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're bringing back the Scarface days, really.
They really are just like Timu, like low rent Jeffrey Epstein's. So,
You sent that video of him, like a compilation of him essentially explaining how to pimp. I knew what he had been arrested for, and I was like, oh, okay. So he's like, but I thought he was just doing that in Romania like recently. I didn't know he like founded an empire based on this, and this is how he got his money.
so this has been going around now, and it is worthy of some discussion, actually. The history of Andrew Tate. So Andrew Tate started off as a kickboxer, not like major league. I guess like there's K1 and Glory and one championship, or like the Major League Baseball, the UFC of kickboxing. Tate was like a rung below that. So he was a legit kickboxer. And then so he was known in, for high level martial arts nerds would have known about him. And then he came into prominence in the UK by being on a season of Big Brother. But he was pretty quickly kicked off because the stuff he says on the internet, he's been saying forever. So he was kind of, early days OG of getting canceled off the internet. And then, yeah, so he made his empire moving to Romania and running a harem of cam girls, basically. So he had, in pimp terms, yes, he had like a stable of cam girls, and that is what he built that off of. So, and then of course, from the cam girl business, kind of I don't know, DIY pornography, I guess you call it. He then went on to make what we've heard about him more when, I guess, when did he really come to like, I remember him getting really big on my feed, like what, 2022 or something was like the height of his.
So he, kickboxing, Big Brother, and then he went to Romania for the cam girls. And at the same time, yeah, is he starting to appear on timelines as like some alpha male spokesperson while running the harem?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
He had that, and then he made Hustlers University. This is the thing, I think, that whether he's actually guilty of any of the sex trafficking stuff, by the way, like any of the rape charges and stuff, because, to be fair, he has been accused, he has not been convicted, so, we will give him that.
yeah, allegedly.
But whether or not he's guilty of that, what he is guilty of is being kind of the first one of these like male influencers who just started like a multi-level marketing scheme, and now that's all you see. Like all the guys are like, yeah, buy like, buy my course, this thing. And I think that enough is enough for him to receive the death penalty. Like he really ruined the world by telling every fucking idiot male like personal trainer that you can become a billionaire and move to Dubai by just having, yeah, they're
Yeah.
pyramid schemes. And yeah,
Yeah.
but Hustlers University in its, I mean, I've never subscribed, or well, my subscription ran out. That's yeah, the original Hustlers University thing was like teaching them how you pimp and how you like get guy like he would get these girls under his wing, under his control, and then he would get the girls to convince poor simps subscribing to their webcam things that they were in love with them and all that stuff. So that's
He's
how he made his
essentially
bones.
Tom Cruise from Magnolia.
Yeah, precisely. That's a good point. Like
It
people have been
is
doing this
exactly
forever, and
that.
like he's the first person to like
Yeah.
really capitalize on having an internet presence doing it.
Yeah, he is. That's exactly right. Is he was the pickup artist for the internet age.
Yeah. I just
You
looked it up
know.
because for some reason I thought he did a speech at Oxford. Didn't, didn't, but
Could you imagine?
he
Yeah,
apparently does a debate.
he debated Peter Hitchens.
Yeah. He debated Salman Rushdie, which
Fuck off.
yeah, yeah. I mean I'm not gonna watch it, but he did
Oh
start
my
the
God.
Bruv political party, apparently. Tate's bid for UK election. Oh my gosh.
I hate him so much. Yeah, this is something to bring up too. So I think really the interesting thing, the Tate brothers coming to America is on its, it's not that interesting to me. They have dual citizenship between the United Kingdom and the United States, which somehow has given them the most annoying accent
Oh
on
God,
the
I'm
face
glad
of
you
the
brought
earth.
that
Yeah.
up.
I
Yeah, they
do
do the
not
glottal
know.
stop, but they speak perfect English. What
I
or
do not know what they're doing.
yeah.
Like, and I know where they're from. Like, they're from Luton, which is a shithole. It's also where like the most annoying airport is to go to. But it's sort of like Luton is like a small town
I think that's where you
slightly
got
north of
deported.
London. Yeah. So it is it's slightly north of London. So like if you're in Luton, you'll have kind of a London accent. And
Hmm.
no one in England speaks like the Tate brothers. They are
Yeah.
their own little microcosm of an accent, and I hate it so much. But no, what I was going to say was I think the interesting thing about this is what it kind of means for the MAGA movement,
Hmm.
because on one end you have obviously the like Zoomer men who are into Elon Musk and into the Tate brothers, and then have that's gotten them into the Donald Trump camp. Obviously, Trump, which I absolutely believe, by the way, that the Trump administration put pressure on the Romanian government. I mean, it's not like proven yet, but why wouldn't they? They're completely out of pocket right now, doing just fucking shit up.
I was
So
curious about that
yeah,
because like I thought I read something a long time ago, but I couldn't find it about how they were pressuring them to release them because I guess just because they're American citizens, but we really know like they're Trump's favorite type of citizen, the one that supports him.
yeah. I think it's
But did
just
they
a. I
serve
mean, I
they
think
served
it's
their
just a.
time or
No,
Romania's
no.
just like, all right, we'll lend them out to you, but they have to come back because they do have to come
Yeah,
back.
yeah. Their case is pending, so they were in jail for a. I didn't follow the case super closely, but I knew they were in jail in Romania for a while,
Oh, so
and
this
then
is
they
like
were
their bail.
released. Yeah,
Got
basically
it.
they're out on bail.
Yeah, they're not going
But
back.
yeah, it'll be. Yeah,
There's no
no
fucking
way,
way.
no way. They are not seeing their day in court
I
there.
was just thinking like
Uh,
how amazing it would be if somehow Andrew Tate is involved in like the assassination of the president since he's in Miami. There's all these like JFK like conspiracies of the Tate connection.
Tate's gonna be our Oswald.
Yep.
More accurately, he'll be a John Wilkes Booth character.
Okay, go on.
Well, John Wilkes Booth was one of
Who's
the
that?
most famous. John Wilkes Booth
I'm dead.
killed Lincoln. He was one of the
Allegedly.
most famous actors of his time.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. Did... Does anyone have those Tate quotes?
Oh my God, yeah. We should do
Yeah.
that real quick.
We're breaking the rules, guys. We're top G in this.
This is a very important subject that we're on though. So
I was just looking up some from Goodreads. The top one, I guess, with 12 likes is what color is your Bugatti?
okay. Well,
Which is kind
I
of
mean
a
that's
shitty
not
one if I'm honest with you, but
Tate's someone who's not really into the idea of therapy. He's in the idea of like self-improvement, just working through tough times. In short, he's a stoic. So we thought maybe comparing some of his quotes to other great stoicists in history. One that comes to mind is Marcus Aurelius. So we're just going to kind of test our friends' knowledge to see if they can see who said it, Andrew Tate or Marcus Aurelius. A person's worth is measured by the worth of what they value.
That's got to be Tate.
Yeah, see, some of these are down the middle. Honestly, I don't have the answers. You made this. It's too complex language. I'm gonna go Marcus Aurelius. Dan, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, it's a distinction without a difference between them. So
Yeah, that one's pretty close. This one's another nail biter. Your mind must be stronger than your feelings.
I think that's Tate.
That's probably Tate.
It's probably
It's
Marcus Aurelius, I think.
it's simple language. I'm gonna
No,
go
that's
Tate.
Tristan. That's Tristan.
The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. I mean, that's not
Obviously Tate.
Tate.
That's Tate. It's definitely Tate.
I'm gonna
To
go
not be like,
Marcus.
I'm gonna go Marcus on that one too. This one I'm pretty sure I know the answer. You don't have to be happy to keep going. You just have to keep going.
That's Marcus Aurelius. That's
God damn it, Ben. That's Tate up and down. You know, have feel good, you go. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. I don't know. I really don't know.
that's
I think
actually.
it's Tate, maybe. Yeah, I'm gonna go Tate.
I'm gonna go
Read it
Marcus
one more time.
Aurelius again.
It's
What'd you
either
say?
like a rough translation from Latin or Tate
Yeah.
talk. I can't tell.
Just the fact that it says mind and not brain or something.
Yeah.
Like, mind just seems too, like, scholastic for Tate. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Also, finding strength just seems a little, I don't know. It's also like the structure of the way it's said to me is kind of a giveaway. I'm gonna go with Marcus on that. Yeah.
Marcus.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
is the thing. This is like I was saying that's hard about this is that all of these like gymfluencers, like the male gymfluencers,
Yeah.
like their whole personal philosophy kind of is like Marcus Aurelius fortune cookies. So
hmm
it's really hard to find a difference.
Well, yeah. Let's try this one. Depression isn't real. If you're depressed, go to the gym.
100%.
That's Marcus.
Yeah.
That's
That's
100%.
Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't even bother looking that one up. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. I
Hey.
could go either way. I don't
Uh,
know.
yeah.
But I'm gonna go Tate.
Okay, we gotta stop.
Is there
We're
another
undermining our
battle?
credibility. Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, we can wrap this up, but yeah, I was
Yeah.
just gonna say it's funny watching MAGA eat itself right now between like the epic online Musk Tate bros and like the salt of the earth boomer Americans who are like, wait, I thought we were doing this to take down the evil pedophiles. Now they're letting this guy in. It'll
You
it'll
actually
be
you're
fun
actually
to
seeing
see.
that? You're seeing
Oh
that?
yeah. The people who thought that Trump was going to bring back American family values, and they see someone as, someone like Andrew Tate.
He's the opposite of family values.
Look, it's a big tent, guys. There's gonna be some
Yeah.
infighting.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, I don't think we're gonna be able to get past not talking about the little sit down with
Yeah.
Zelensky.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
The Zelensky dress code that was brought up. Zelensky got asked a question during like the press hour before they like sat down and actually had real negotiations, which quickly unraveled into just fucking chaos and screaming at each other. The reporter, and I guess you could call him that. Here, I have it right here. He is technically a reporter, but he's also Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend.
Do you know his
Uh,
outlet? Real America's Voice, whatever that is.
Real America's
Brian
voice.
Brian Glenn.
All right. So, reporter Brian Glenn asked during the like news hour before they sat down for the negotiations, like, why don't you wear a suit? You guys have heard this commentary before, right? Like, it's so disrespectful that he doesn't wear a suit when he comes to Washington. Why doesn't he wear a suit? Like, I'm pretty sure this got kind of like made up on Fox News, like from like Brian Kilmeade and just a bunch of people who just want to talk shit about him over not wearing a suit.
I've heard that in relation to Fetterman, but never Zelensky. But I believe it, obviously.
I've heard
Well,
it.
this is this is a big pet peeve in like the conservative circles in general. So yeah, they talk about it with Fetterman, like Sagar and Jetty bitches about this
Mm,
shit a lot because it's a weird thing that like these conservatives, a lot, especially like young conservatives, like consider themselves like models of sartorial excellence, and they're like, I wear a suit, and a suit's, the only measure of a man, and all this stuff. It's really fucking gay. I don't know of a better way to say it, but
yeah,
they're like, why don't you wear a suit? Meh, meh, meh. I don't know. It's hall monitor shit, is what it is. It's just like you should be dressing nice to meet the president. And it's like, or like respect our hallowed halls. And it's like, get the
yeah.
fuck over it. No one gives a shit.
Wait,
Um,
but specifically towards Zelensky, you've heard it?
There
yeah,
has been
well,
that,
Okay,
yeah.
like Sagar, like even Sagar.
I
I don't know
don't.
about
Oh,
soccer.
I don't know if the right-wing circles have talked about that. I will maybe take the dissenting opinion here, but not for the reasons you think. It is a little fucking ridiculous
Yeah,
that he is been throughout this entire time parading around in military fatigues
yeah,
like he's on the front lines. I mean, we all rightfully so gave George Bush shit when he did the landing on that aircraft carrier and was like playing dress up as an air like as a Air Force fighter pilot. We've seen Netanyahu do it when he's having
mm-hmm.
when he's doing press stuff, meeting with IDF soldiers. I mean, it's not a new thing. What's the best example would be like African dictators and stuff having their, 40 giant gold medals in their like military, general outfits, like they look like
Which
Napoleon. It's not
Zelensky
like,
should do. That would be
yeah,
so cool.
Yeah,
that would be
he
way
should give him
cooler.
medals, himself medals.
He should, I mean, probably has, you know. So while I don't agree with like the conservative angle on it of like you should respect the office. Who gives a shit? But
Yeah,
people being like, oh, it's disrespectful to him. It's like the man is going around like dressed like he's in the special forces. And yeah, that's ridiculous. It's like, I'm sorry, you're not on the front lines, like, with an
yeah.
assault rifle
Just for the
leading
occasion.
men. Why are you dressed like that?
I think it would be in worse taste to show up in a suit. I mean, especially if
To
he's going to
I
come and
while
plead
this is
his
going on.
case, right?
I don't know. Right-wing people are all up on this stolen valor bullshit all the time, which I think is like a stupid thing. I don't
Damn, I didn't even
care.
think of that.
But like, if you're worried about stolen valor, then you should definitely be worried about Zelensky doing that. He's not a fucking soldier. And honestly, I don't care about stolen valor for like American troops or whatever. Like, you can wear camo if you want. That's fine. But like, his country is, whatever you think about it politically or the reasons behind the war or whether you're on the side of, no one's actually on the side of Russia. I don't know why we have to have that conversation. But like, whatever you think about it, it kind of is disrespectful to the droves of men that are getting like conscripted into this unwinnable war and just dying senselessly, and he's running around playing dress up. It's not disrespectful to the White House, but it's definitely disrespectful to the Ukrainian people who are just getting fucking carted onto the front lines to be like fucking cannon fodder.
I
I had a,
don't
I had a
think I give
stronger
a
opinion
shit.
on that than I thought I did. Sorry.
I don't think I give a shit either way, to be honest. Like, I just think it's a weird thing to pull so much focus toward. Um,
Yeah.
he was kind of caught off guard by it. He's like, because I you kind of got to watch it because there's a lot going on there. Like, one, the guy tees up Trump. It was a two-part question. He goes, the first part was, President Trump, do you feel like uh your your like legacy will be like if you find peace between these two nations or whatever? I'm probably making it sound a lot better than what he said. Do you think your history or your legacy is going to be that of like a peacemaker and a peace president? And he's like, oh, I hope so. Blah, like Trump is saying this. He's like, I hope so. I really just want to be known as that. A lot of these people are dying. And then Trump goes on a tangent about how the only thing stopping the bullets are bodies. And then talks about how great the farmland is. He starts to like do this weird weave, and then he's like, "But thank you for that question." And then he's like, "You had a second part to that?" And that's when he asked about, he's like, this one's for Zelensky. Why don't you wear a suit?
Yeah, he says it
And
in such like a condescending
yeah,
tone.
it's like you're a fucking low-level reporter. You're talking to another head of
Yeah.
state. Like you would never
What?
talk to another head of state like that. I just thought the treatment of Zelensky here, no matter who he is,
It brings up
was
something
really fucking weird.
it brings up something that I've been thinking about with this blow up. It something feels staged. Not like I don't know to what benefit, and like obviously it wasn't, and the way Trump acts is good television, but everybody knew their lines pretty well.
Yeah, I agree.
You know
I
what I
think
mean? Like
especially the JD
Vance
Vance
jumping in
part.
and like
Yeah,
having the
Yeah.
being prepared to chastise Zelensky. I don't know. Something fell a little off about it to me. Again, I don't think it was a conspiracy to do this. I think that they were prepared to say to mock him, I guess. Because he did and
Yeah.
Trump even said this, he goes, no, Vance said this. He goes, you campaigned with the opposition.
that was
It-
weird. Well, at
Yeah.
some point Trump said, "Well, here's your headline," and then he like
Yeah.
repeated it two or three times.
yeah. They
So
know how to play the
yeah,
media, clearly.
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, a quick note on the reporter, because yeah, I don't think that's the most important part of this, but this is just like Trump 1 was, it's a mean girls presidency. Like, Trump is Regina George. Like, he's the top bitch, top mean
Yeah.
girl. So when he gets all these fucking sycophants in his orbit, which right now is like the entire, White House press corps as well, it's like all of them want to be in the club. So they're going to ask bitchy mean girl questions to the person that they know Trump doesn't like. It's
Yeah.
schoolyard politics, right? So I think that's the easy explanation behind that. I don't know. I didn't listen to the entire press conference. I listened to the last 10 minutes where it really, devolved into that. And I think you're right. I think it was. I think they had those jabs locked and loaded. They were at the ready. But the thing that I don't think was staged was, and I don't think people on the left are willing to admit this, is Zelensky did walk the fuck into that. He did get petulant in front of them, and he should have shut the fuck up. And
Mm.
I think a thing that's annoying about this to me, I mean, it's annoying on both sides because I hate both sides. So there's two things to it. Is either, it's classic confirmation bias. It's either Zelensky is this hero standing up to the big bag United States and by extension Putin, and then there's also Trump and Vance are epic, and we're totally owning Zelensky, and people see what they want to see, right? And it's sort of somewhere in between. But like, if you're honest with yourself and you are honest with what American empire is, what I think we really saw from this press conference that is extraordinary. I'm not saying it isn't extraordinary, but what's extraordinary about it is that we saw it. It's not that it happened. And I think that like all the guffawing coming from people on the left going, I can't believe they talk this way to Zelensky, to another world leader who's fighting a war and shit. And it's like, do you really, in your heart, not believe that Joe Biden, if he had been cognizant, or Barack Obama during his 2 terms, or George W. Bush, or Bill Clinton, or George H.W., or Ronald Reagan, or literally any fucking president since World War II does not have those meetings with world leaders behind closed doors? If
Yeah.
you
The
think
key being
that
behind closed
this,
doors, though.
yeah, if you think that this kind of conversation doesn't happen all the fucking time with the US, the sitting US president and whoever world leader is, I don't know what to tell you. But the thing that was extraordinary about it was we saw it on display.
It made
Yeah,
both of them
so
look weak, in my opinion. Like that bickering, just
yeah, it was
Both of them
totally a
being
bad
Zelensky and
look.
Trump.
yeah, both
But like
Okay,
parties,
yeah.
everyone in that
I
room.
don't I don't know how you can look at that and think it looked good for Zelensky though. I think he was being petulant. I think he was thinking that I think he thinks that his being a media darling is going to carry him further than it is now. And he thought he could step to Trump, which I mean, you got to know better than that. You know it's not gonna go your way. Have you ever seen a debate with Trump?
Well, especially in
Like
that environment. you're in the
Well,
And
also
especially
yeah, the
when I'm
lion's den.
it
sorry,
is a
I
second
don't
language. It's
whether or not you think it's a just war, it is being bankrolled and propped up by the United States government. Like,
Yeah,
I don't care what you think about that. If the US decides to stop footing the bill for this, it's fucking over for them. So
yeah,
like I don't know how you can look at that and be like, "Oh, Zelensky is such a smooth operator, so smart." I mean, like he did I'm not on the side of Trump and Vance for like how they did it. Like it was really grotesque and, whatever, but also I don't really fucking care. I mean, I think it's really fucking gross that the amount of media attention and people on social media are like the outrage about like them being rude to fucking a head of state rather than the outrage for, I don't know, the fucking young men, the generation of young men from the Ukraine that are fucking gone. Like, where's your fucking tears for them? We don't even have to get into the fact that most of these people never have a fucking word to say for the hundreds of thousands of people dead in Gaza. And then they're like, well, he was mean to Vladimir Zelensky. Who the fuck cares?
yeah. I think the optics of it are important, and I think they all looked bad. I don't think that there's. You said something. I can't remember. Oh, there's no way to make Zelensky look good in this, I think you said. I don't know. I watched the whole thing, and it definitely had several different like the first 20 minutes where they were like almost flirting,
yeah.
like, and then it just kind of, as soon as I think JD piped up, Zelensky, kind of had to correct him. He's like, they invaded our country. Like, I didn't start this war. And there's also things that were said by Trump previously about Zelensky being a dictator. Didn't he call Zelensky a dictator? I'm pretty
Not
sure.
Trump
not
did,
in that
yeah.
not
Not
in
in
that
that interview,
meeting.
But
but
yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sure he knew
Yeah.
about it. And this has kind of been like a message that they're trying to establish. I think Zelensky, if anything like was pro Zelensky in that, it was that he was being bullied and that he just kind of like sat there and took it to some degree. And then, like you said, Ben, I kind of agree. It's like he should have sat there and taken it. And then,
Yeah, you
in that
gotta just
private
be their
meeting,
bitch. You
you
gotta
have to be their bitch
you have to be you're their bitch for
in
that
public,
meeting.
at
That's
least.
just
And
like
then,
it's
and
not
but
it's not nice, but that's what it
yeah,
is.
I think like when it's a fine line, he really didn't have many options. He doesn't have many options, but he definitely didn't have many options going there and getting in front of the press the way he did. Maybe they should decline doing that in general, but I'm sure Trump and that team wanted to beat up on him in a very
Yeah.
public way.
Yeah.
And like you said, Dan, it looked a bit scripted. JD's part looked a bit scripted,
Because
but
he's not that good off
boy,
the cuff. JD is not that good off
No.
the
JD,
cuff. Yeah.
No,
uh,
he
he can
definitely
rip some
practiced
zingers.
those in the mirror.
Yeah.
He practiced those in the mirror. Yeah.
I thought that Zelensky actually had a zinger against the suit question.
Oh yeah,
He's
he's
like,
like, sorry, do
no, I don't know. What did he say?
Do the voice.
it.
He said, I might have a more expensive suit than you when I come
It
back.
goes, maybe I come back. Maybe I have more expensive suit than you.
I thought that was pretty good. For a second language,
Yeah,
pretty good.
he's pretending like the outfit he's wearing now is not the costume, but a suit would be the costume, which is just I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah.
It could be either. I don't really. It's not like he needs to be fucking flexible and like ready to dodge a bullet. Like he can put on a suit. I don't really,
Yeah.
They make suits like that now. So,
where it's
Yeah.
like a
I
John
mean,
Wick suit.
yeah.
yeah, I want one so bad. The messaging is really clear with that costume choice. And
Hmm.
it is a
Yeah.
costume, is it's supposed to evoke emotion for the idea that he's coming like straight out of a war zone, which is just not true. I don't think
Is
it's
it?
the most important
Yeah.
thing, but like I think anybody for let's call a spade there when we're talking about why he's wearing that, and especially in this particular meeting. I don't know. It doesn't look good for anybody. And what was the result of it now?
I think the
Didn't they
result of
ask
it,
him to leave?
I mean,
That's what
that's
I
what the
read
headline
that.
says. Yeah.
they did have a closed door meeting after that, of course.
But they did not sign the rare earth. deal, which was what he was there to do, which was surprising to me. I thought that they would still
Well,
proceed.
yeah,
I
that's the
still think
only
that will
piece
be
of
signed.
leverage.
I don't think Trump's
Yeah.
going to walk away from that deal. I'm sure Trump has had worse business meetings.
Yeah.
Probably.
I think the worst result of this is if you go on social media, you see all this renewed support for the Ukraine side in the war, which I think is just so boneheaded because the last administration did not outline the goals for the war. And so
Mhm.
where are we now? Do more people continue to die?
Is the option just, all right, you lost this territory, you're gonna have to just say stop the war, give the territory, and then we're just gonna draw the new lines, and that's gonna be that.
I
So
mean,
the other argument is like, well, what if he does it again? What if he just keeps encroaching, him being Putin, and then just
mhm.
moves in and then slowly takes over the whole thing or whatever
Right. And so
he
the
wants?
argument was security guarantees, right? And Trump
Yeah,
didn't talk about security guarantees. If you read the New York Times, they act like Trump will not agree to any security guarantees based off something he said in a cabinet meeting. But as we all know, he changes his mind every time
yeah,
he opens his mouth.
Yeah.
What he said in the Oval Office with Zelensky was that we will decide on security guarantees after we negotiate the ceasefire. I think that's probably the best way to go about it. I think what they should do, which is what I've been saying for years, is just have a vote, a referendum in the Donbass, which is where you have the contentious, supposedly Russian-speaking areas, which allegedly Zelensky outlawed speaking Russian throughout the whole country, blah blah blah. Anyways, have a internationally sanctioned, viewed vote referendum on if those areas want to be Russian, if they want to be
yeah.
Ukrainian. I think they should be able to be independent. There's no reason that they shouldn't be, and then go from there. I don't.
It's a better
Do you
option than
really think
war.
like how embarrassed? The invasion has been so embarrassing for Putin. He's lost so many people. He couldn't take the entire
Mhm.
country. Much less, can you imagine him going into the rest of Eastern Europe? Like, that's such a joke. And I mean, Trump even said in that Oval Office interview, he's like, I'm a big fan of Poland. I will keep you NATO troops in Poland, right? I can't imagine Putin wants to waste more capital on this war or human capital. And I think, honestly, Putin and Zelensky need an off-ramp. I think this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
There
agree.
are no, I mean, truthfully, what does it mean for America to give them a security guarantee? You know, like we can't.
Right.
There's no, we will never go to war with Russia ever.
Mhm.
We know what that would look like, and no one's willing to do it. So
Yeah.
it's going to be proxy wars, and Ukraine's going to be
Yeah.
it. But I mean, I haven't even heard anyone say what Putin wants other than like world domination, which is, I don't think really his motivation. I think
It's
there's probably a
disingenuous to
lot
say
of
that.
like economic reasons why he wants parts of, or maybe the entire Ukraine. I
Yeah.
don't know if he truly wants all of the USSR back, but people say that too.
Yeah.
I'm not him. I don't have his like, but
I haven't seen the evidence of that. I think that's just really Cold War thinking. In the same way that I'm honestly not convinced that Stalin wanted to take over the world. I don't really
mm,
see that from even the USSR.
One thing Trump said I thought was interesting. Everybody wants him to insult Putin, but at the same time wants the US to be the middleman in this war. And he asked how he's supposed to call Putin a dictator 1 minute and then talk to him on the phone 5 minutes later trying to make a deal. I mean, obviously he's called Zelensky a dictator, so
Yeah.
like kind of undermines
yeah.
himself, but I broadly agree with what he says here.
Yeah, show me the lie. I mean, I don't love that he called Zelensky a dictator. Not that I'm any like fanboy of Zelensky. It doesn't help his credibility, but also, you know, my boy likes to talk mad shit. Like
Yeah.
uh, Trump's just gonna he fucks around. What are you gonna do?
The
Uh,
difference is Putin has nukes and
Yeah.
he has a
but
much
yeah.
bigger army and he's the one with the fucking power. So,
Yeah, this is the thing. To what end? To what end does that help anything, calling him a dictator? Even if he is a
right.
dictator. Like what does it do? This is what we were talking about last week. It's like you can wish away Putin all you want. He is the head of Russia.
Hmm.
You play with the cards you're dealt. This is the world we live in.
Do you
Do
think,
you want to
Dan, you
just
brought
take your
up,
ball and go home and cry about it? I wanted to bring up, I sent this to the group chat, but this is some breaking news that I saw right before we started recording. Keir Starmer says a number of other countries are considering joining Britain and France in sending soldiers to Ukraine as part of a coalition of the willing.
Yeah, I saw that too.
What up? So I
It's funny
think,
how we recycle phrases,
yeah, it
because
wasn't
obviously
like,
that was a Bush era
yeah,
phrase for
yeah.
going
And
into
it worked
combat.
out
Go
so
ahead.
well. I think anybody who can be actually honest about what would be the pros of continuing this war, which I think we all agree here, there's not really any like clear win or loss of that. Instead, like, I mean, the clear win for like American hawks or hawks in England even would be like taking Putin out of power and putting in a puppet government in Russia, which Western powers have always wanted. That would be the extreme hawk way of looking at it. But for normal people, the only we know that's not going to happen. So for normal people who could actually be honest about this, what is this other than a kind of like a stalemate proxy war money laundering scheme?
I do
Like
think
that's what it is. It's just laundering money into the Ukraine by weapon sales to kind of keep a semi-hot war going in
Mhm.
Europe that doesn't really affect, it's not gonna touch Germany, it's not gonna touch France, it's not gonna touch England, so it's just enough that it keeps going and keeps going and keeps going until Zelensky runs out of fucking Ukrainians to, put in front of Russian fucking ballistic missiles. Um,
Yeah.
because we know if we're going to play a bodies game, we know from history who wins that. Russia
Yeah.
do, Russia's not sprinters. They're
I,
marathon runners, and they do good in the fourth quarter. They never do good in the beginning, but like, and it's because they just like this is how they fucking won World War II, which no one wants to remember. The amount of tweets I've seen in the last week of like, my uncle didn't, or like my grandfather didn't die in World War II to bow down to a punk like Putin. It's like, do you know who our
Yeah, we
allies
were
were in World
allies.
War II?
Yeah.
The fuck are you talking about?
I do
Yeah,
think.
so
Let me just jump in and
go
say this real quick. I do think we talked about this in one of the first episodes, but the Trump policy is obviously own the libs, right? And they do, he's done like the paper straws, executive order, et cetera. A lot of executive orders just based on owning the libs policy. I think with this recent blow up, the reaction that we've seen from Democrat voters, and this is what annoys me so much about it, is that you're trying to get like the opposite of that, kind of like the own the GOP, own the Trump
Yeah,
policy by wanting to continue the war. I don't know if they actually
yeah.
want to continue the war, but they want to support Ukraine, and I see a lot of like Facebook profile pictures now up that saying like I stand with Ukraine.
Yeah.
Stand with them for what? I want to know what they mean when they put that.
Yeah. I
I
think
mean,
I mean, we remember when the invasion happened 3 years ago on my birthday, by the way.
oh,
Saw
happy
that on
That
birthday.
happened.
Yeah, that was funny. Um, remember when the war first kicked off, there was a huge outpouring of support for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, and of like, rightfully so. But yeah, the reemergence of that, I think you're exactly right. I think it's a knee-jerk reaction to anything Trump does must be bad, so we have to fight it. And well, and also it's a coalescence of like a huge charm offensive that the media has put on
Yeah,
with
that's true.
Zelensky of shoving it down our throat that he's the greatest world leader of
Century.
our generation,
Person of the
having
year, person of the
yeah,
century. Yeah.
Vogue cover, all of that. And then also from ever since 2016, they were able to just make this fucking coup of opinion that Vladimir Putin is Hitler 2.0.
I truly think like the support of Ukraine defending their own sovereignty is justified. And I think that's maybe what people gravitate to. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think 100% of like the Ukraine flag in your Twitter bio is like own the conservatives or MAGA. But I think
No,
there's some reactionary force there that is like your per, your identity politics is now also you have to support Ukraine if you
Yeah.
are like not
yeah.
MAGA.
No,
So a
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no,
Great point.
little bit of both.
I don't think it's fully fully just owning. I think people are coming from a legitimate place though that's also very misguided. Like they don't the idea that they have this blind support without having any interest in learning the facts of the matter, like learning anything about what was happening that in 2014, understanding that this is a proxy war that was actually not started under Donald Trump or Joe Biden. I mean, this was happening under Barack Obama. I think people's hearts are in the right place. I think there's some problems to be gleaned from that. I think there's a lot more sympathy to go around for, this white European nation than there ever was for, I don't know, anywhere in Africa, anywhere in South America, anywhere with brown people or Muslim people, and that I find disturbing. By the way, people have given me shit before for this. Like, I don't mean to be flippant about the suffering of the Ukrainian people. This is an incredibly, incredibly sad story. This is terrible. And being in Ukraine right now must be hell on earth. That doesn't change the fact that, like I think I said on the last episode, this is a proxy war, and this war doesn't need to keep happening. And there actually is, like Dan outlined, a very easy, actually, off-ramp to this. Because I agree, Dan, I don't think Putin wants to keep this going. It doesn't look good for him. So this outpouring of like, we're gonna coalition of the willing. I mean, what the fuck are we talking about?
Yeah.
Are we just going to kill off that entire nation? For what? Why?
And I think too, I don't know how much Stormer has to worry about this, but I mean, really one of the reasons that you see the downfall of the Greens in Germany is over this, alongside
Hmm.
Gaza as well. But a lot of the high energy prices that resulted in the sanctions that happened after the February 22nd, or excuse me,
Hmm.
February 2022 invasion are a consequence of that. And obviously you got to appease your voters at some point, no matter how much the
Hmm.
your military economy wants to continue.
Yeah, it's sad that it really just does boil down to resources, a
Yeah.
resource dispute and control over resources, and eventual reconstruction. And
Mhm.
I'm sure it's gonna be the same thing in Gaza. It's so fucking weird that we profit off of the destruction and the rebuilding of these countries that we like go into and help
Yeah.
Yeah.
help.
And also, not for nothing, I know I bring it up all the time, but it's worth bringing up all the time. All of this outrage being manufactured about this fucking stupid dog and pony show that happened between JD Vance and Zelensky has been seized upon by the media is a great opportunity to not talk about Gaza, to not talk about the fact that Israel has broken the ceasefire that really never was a ceasefire, and that just in the last 2 days, Israel has cut off any humanitarian aid. So now they're not
Yeah.
even giving the pretense of the fact that they are starving this population, and this genocide is going full bore ahead. So, again, I don't mean to speak flippantly about the suffering of the Ukrainian people. I know it's serious, but for anybody who wants to feign this outrage about how rude Donald Trump was, and they don't have an inkling of that humanity for men, women, and children being starved to death, being bombed to death, being actually, an actual Holocaust happening right now, I don't have any respect for that opinion, and I don't want to hear about it. I don't care. And neither should you. Not on this level.
I just want to say this real quick. One thing I doubt most Americans, if not most people in the world, know that Israel can control the humanitarian aid, i.e., food, supplies, etc.,
Hmm.
going into Gaza.
Dan, you brought up which I think is a good idea in like a perfect world, just them giving it to the people. Like I'm, all
A
about
referendum. Yeah.
yeah, direct democracy. Like I love that. And do it on a semi-regional basis, but one that makes sense like depending on like ethnic groups or whatever.
Yeah.
And Peter Hitchens mentioned this that like Ukraine is split in kind of a weird, somewhat arbitrary way and like to be part of Russia. So certainly Russia would get a chunk of Ukraine,
Yeah.
probably what they have taken and more based on nothing other than just kind of my assumption. But do you think those elections could be fair? Do you think that they could have like a free and fair election? Or there's just so much political capital in this for like, well,
No chance in fucking hell. No,
yeah,
like,
every,
no.
yeah,
I mean, but like it's the solution that we've currently pursued over like the what last decade or so, and I'm talking about the immediate, not like the historical context that's last since, whatever Stalin, I guess, brought the Ukraine into the Soviet fold is have a proxy war. I mean, can we at least try to have some kind of referendum with international
Yeah.
observers?
yeah, yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be
I mean,
great.
no, Dan's diagnosis, I think, is the practical and the morally correct way to go about it. But when did practicality or morality ever have anything to do with US statecraft? So,
Yeah.
but I agree with Dan.
And
I don't know.
it's like Crimea, sorry, yeah, last thing. Crimea, like that was not like they annexed it and then they had it was a sham election, wasn't it?
I mean,
To
you could say
secede.
that, but you know that Western media would have we would have never seen the end of the protest that came after like an apparent sham election, right?
Inside of the country or the region or
Yeah,
which
I mean,
protest?
yeah, like sure, like you could have seen it. They could have shown us Kiev and just to and showed protest in Kiev over the annexation of Crimea, right? But I don't remember seeing any of that. I don't remember seeing
Mm.
any protest over the annexation of Crimea or after the referendum vote to prove
I
it was like a sham.
Now it would certainly seem unthinkable that we wouldn't see a news cycle on this like 24/7, but I think back in 2014 I can't really remember. It was big news,
It
and
was,
but
yeah.
the way Zelensky speaks about it now is like, no, this is not a new war since 2022. It's the same war since
Yeah.
2014, which
Yeah.
I think is true from like the Ukrainian perspective, right? Like
True
that
from,
seems legit.
I mean, it's true from your perspective, I'd say as well, right?
Yeah, but well, no, because I'm an American. I only hear about it when like there's a new invasion, you know? Like I would say
Yeah.
if in 2021, not a
Wait, are
lot of
you speaking as
Americans would
Andrew
have
Parker? Or are you
said,
speaking as an American here?
"Oh, just an American." Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. For my I mean it's the border seemed settled, you know? They had that referendum and Crimea just became part of Russia. So that seemed over. I didn't know that they were still like going at it. I didn't know that they had like border were they skirmishing? It seemed
Well,
like a pretty
the reason that Trump sent the Javelin missiles
was to
was
ensure or
well, I
because they
mean,
were
they were using them. And I mean, like even a CIA cutout, Human Rights Watch, reported that. I mean, I'm not saying no one is innocent in this, right? But
hmm
Ukraine was allegedly bombing their own areas as well.
hmm
Well,
Yeah, the
their areas
Donbass.
being the regions of the Donbass, which are Russian
Yeah.
speaking. And I mean, the allegation from the Western side was that Putin sent in Russian mercenaries that Russia said were
I remember that. Yeah.
separatist, right?
hmm
Yeah. Fog of war shit.
Yeah. It's just very hard to keep track of fog of war for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, like, let's be real. And I mean this respectfully, like, how different are Russians and Ukrainians ethnically?
I,
I have no idea.
yeah, the borders have shifted so much. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's impossible to really
And,
say.
and I mean, like, I'm all for like locality in life, being regional and stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, I believe in an independent Ukrainian state, but I also believe in there can be an autonomous region between these two places as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, Peter Hitchens talks about this too, like the Georgian stuff with a South Ossetia, I believe it's how it's pronounced. And then
It is interesting because I don't give a shit about nationalism at all. Like at home, I'm like, this is such a stupid thing to like have your identity around like the country that you're born in.
yeah,
And then here I am at the same time holding this opposite view where I'm like, Ukraine's a sovereign nation. Like they were attacked, blah, blah, blah. But truthfully, if there is like a Texas of Ukraine that doesn't really give a shit about the nation of Ukraine, they care about their state, region, area, and they almost identify themselves as like, instead of independent, they're just like, we're either independent or Russian, like culturally, ancestrally it becomes more complicated then.
yeah.
Mhm. Are we gonna talk Luigi documentary? Yeah.
Holy shit. I'm glad you
The-
guys watched this documentary. Ben, did you have to do
Yeah.
anything extraordinary to get it in the UK, or do they?
Yeah. Yeah, City had to sign up for Discovery Plus for me.
Okay.
And Ben will never hear
This
the end of it.
Yeah, which I'm sure we will forget to unsubscribe from, and then like a year
Yeah.
from now we'll realize that we still have it.
Jack won't be able to
As
eat
is
that
the
month.
trick. Yeah, yeah.
That's not funny.
Back on
Sorry.
back on formula, buddy. Sorry, no more organic fruit for you. Andrew, you told us about this documentary that came out. Do you want to give us a little
Yeah.
intro to it?
Yeah. So me and my wife were just perusing on the Netflix or HBO, just looking for something, and then we saw a beautiful man, a beautiful wise man, on the cover of this documentary. What's the name of the documentary?
Who is
Uh,
Luigi
who
Mangione?
is
Who
Luigi?
is
Yeah.
Luigi Mangione?
Yeah.
Hey, and we're like, surely this is kind of ridiculous. That was my first thought. I was like, this is absurd that they already have a documentary. I mean, they did
Yeah.
this same thing with like P. Diddy. Like they had one in the can. But just like the turnover rate, it's directed by Brian Ross and Rhonda Schwartz. Were those the two talking heads in the?
I don't think
I
so.
hope not.
No,
Okay.
no, I've got thoughts on them though. We can get into
Yeah, I really want to
Yeah.
get into them.
Yeah.
But it kind of takes you through who Luigi was as a student because he's really young. He hasn't really had much life experience, but also one of the wisest men in the world, a guru to some.
Yeah, so I just want to before I actually took a lot of the sorry, blah, blah, the documentary is only 45 minutes or
Yeah,
so, but I took a lot of notes on it because there's a lot to say. But I think before we get into this, I would like to take note of the fact that Luigi Mangione's lawyer commented on this, which I was just trying to do a Google search. And I would encourage any listener to just anytime you're thinking about it, try and do a Google search of Luigi and just see what's happening in the news because there is almost nothing. And I saw this come up on because I follow a couple Luigi accounts on Twitter, so I was able to find this. But there is a real media blackout on any news Luigi related, which I think we'll get into when we talk about this documentary anyway. But last week, I think it was, Luigi Mangione's lawyer was making a statement about this, of the fact that just the immorality and the illegality of this documentary being made in the first place. So
hmm
when you watch it, there is the one of the lead investigators for the case for the NYPD, fucking Eric Adams is in the
Yep.
documentary, and they're discussing evidence of like Luigi's letter to the FBI, I believe, and bits of Luigi's diary that at the time that this documentary came out had not been given to the defense yet. I
yeah,
mean,
Oh,
the amount of this is why I really, really want to get a lawyer on to talk about this case in depth. Because the way this case has been being handled is absolutely insane. And the mere presence of this documentary in a normal case, in a normal world, in a just world, would be grounds for this case to be dismissed. So I just wanted to start with that before we get into any of it. And
yeah,
if you guys are okay, I just wanted to just start with we can tag team on this, but kind of go through. I've got some rough notes of like how the documentary unfolds. But one thing I wanted to start with is they have they have a content warning at the beginning of the documentary, but also very interestingly, they have a right after the content warning, they have a all persons are presumed innocent until proven guilty in big letters before they start this documentary, which is fucking rich because
yeah.
they make this statement and then they go on for 45 minutes to paint a case of how severely guilty Luigi Mangione
There's like the Law and
is.
Order like theme gong right after they say that,
Oh
I feel
yeah,
like.
yeah, it is.
Gong.
Yeah. Produced by executive producer Dick Wolf. Seriously,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and it's very funny. A lot of the people getting interviewed, they'll be talking about the case, and then there's just a producer behind the camera being like allegedly, and then they have
Yeah.
to. So they'll
They
be
just have a
like,
big
and then he,
allegedly sign
Fix it
yeah,
in
flashing.
post.
yeah, so they'll be
Jeez.
saying some of the most damning like assumptions, which I have to emphasize. All of the talking heads in this are making just the most brazen assumptions possible, and then they'll say allegedly afterward,
Yeah.
just to cover their bases. Um, but
Well,
yeah, so
just give us an overview of the documentary because I feel like we're just taking
right.
pot shots, so we should give them an idea
Yeah,
of
right.
how it
So I
goes.
mean the documentary's done kind of in the I feel like the art of the documentary is really, really exceptionally shitty
We
right
can't
now
even really
because
call it
of
a
Netflix.
documentary, I think.
No.
No,
Yeah.
But
it's like a
the
60
base
minutes sort of.
yeah, exactly. The basic layout of this is what you would kind of expect from a documentary, I guess, but it has a very clear motive to it. So as the name would suggest, who is Luigi sorry, as the name would suggest, who is Luigi Mangione? It's supposed to be sort of a character study into how this nice boy from an affluent background turned to a life of crime and, as they heavily suggest, insanity. So showing his descent into becoming, our generation's Unabomber, as they very clearly paint it, by the way. And then also trying to paint a picture of his fully innocent victim, Brian Thompson, which is also a hilarious aspect of this documentary. But that is the basic layout, is we kind of go back and forth ping-ponging between Luigi's journey from childhood into having medical problems into becoming the man who shot Brian Thompson, and then also trying to paint this picture of the victim, Brian Thompson, as you see in any kind of sort of true crime thing. And with, again, I think a very clear thesis statement of this evil boy killed this, you know, basically innocent bystander. So it starts in the normal way, and you guys can help me out with this a bit. I don't know if you took notes on it, but it starts in the normal way of kind of having the news clips, people talking about Brian Thompson. I found it very funny that because United Healthcare is based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz,
Oh,
former
that shocked me.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like
former
right.
I knew
candidate
him. Yeah, it's
for
like, whoa.
VP, is talking about him. I also want to bring up the fact that the cover photo for this, like when you have it on your screen, they messed with uh,
Saturation.
yeah, thank you. They messed with the saturation to try and make Luigi look like gaunt and I don't know, not smoking hot, which is just, that's just bad
You could see
journalism.
the
Let's just
abs through the orange jumpsuit, so it's not really helping.
Yeah.
you could slice cheese with those cheekbones, so don't try to tell me anything differently.
Yeah,
The
I
man
sent a
is
couple
stunning.
photos to the group chat, just like it's all in the style of these like serial killer documentary, where
Yeah.
it's just like the person dead center and then like their name big in like condensed letters. I what I liked from or what I didn't I didn't like hardly anything, but I liked the attempt to mirror these two people as
Yep.
if like
Yes.
fate had aligned them to like clash in this way where Luigi was and they did it by both saying they were both like valedictorians.
That was like the one connecting factor.
Yeah.
That's the one
They
thing
were
they
they
have.
were they were
Yeah.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is yeah.
So yeah, so you go through like, starting to have like the establishing things of like different people talking about I found a very funny thing is you get one comment from Brian Thompson's former bodyguard talking about how he should have had a bodyguard.
Yeah.
I should have
It's
been
like,
there.
well, where were you, bro? Like, is this a conspiracy? this can, if you anybody remembers what the media reporting of this story was when it happened, this is just a continuation of it, right? Um, people talk a lot about manufacturing consent from the media. I think the Luigi case is the greatest example of the media trying to manufacture consent and then failing,
Yeah.
and then just blackout, not talking about it anymore. So we get into, I guess, first of all, this documentary has all these kind of quote unquote family friends, which I was thinking about, like anybody could say they're a family friend. A very loose term, which
One of
by
them
the
was
way,
like,
I think if I was murdered, most of the people who know me, if they're like, you want to be a documentary about that, they'd be like, go fuck yourself. So I don't really trust
Yeah.
any of these people as
the
reliable
one
sources.
person that they knew from Brian Thompson was like they went to the fair together because she
Yeah,
knew
that's
her mom as
hilarious.
like the watermelon lady at the fair.
Yeah,
Oh
That
my
that's
was
God, I
that's
so
how
forgot
close it
about
got.
that.
yeah, it's so funny. So, okay, yeah, I wrote this down. So, one so-called family friend. So, again, they are trying really, really hard to humanize Brian Thompson, and and to be fair, I don't know everything about Brian Thompson, but like with this amount of a media push to try to humanize him and make him look good, and the amount they're able to scrape together, my guess is this guy was the biggest piece of shit in the world, uh, which is also probably exemplary of how you can become the CEO of one of the most evil corporations in the
Yeah,
United
you have
States.
to.
The
So
clips of
you
him
have
look
one,
so bad. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. So you have one woman who I think worked at United. She was like, I always thought of them as the Leave It to Beaver family. That's the only description you get. And it's like, all she says is they were always so well dressed. And it's like also, if you want to talk about like a loving, caring husband and father, maybe you should not evoke the 1960s.
Yeah. But that is
Because
the vibe
Yeah.
I get from Brian Thompson. It's like he's
yeah,
an
it's like
alcoholic, abusive.
yeah, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but when they do try and talk about his upbringing and they're showing these photos of him growing up, that guy's got dead eyes. That guy has dead shark eyes. City was saying he looks like an angry drunk.
He does have a DUI, right? Like that came out.
Oh
I
yeah, I
think he
remember reading
did,
that.
and
Yeah.
also the thing of everyone was trying to say, oh, it's this family man. He had been separated from his wife since 2018. Uh,
Didn't know that.
Hmm.
we don't know how much of a connection he had with his kids, but we don't have any pictures of him with his kids in this fucking documentary.
I mean, besides all
So,
that, like what they were trying to show in the clips that they were trying to show is that they, and someone even said this about them, that like he really made United Healthcare a darling of Wall Street.
yeah,
Yeah.
he
That's an
was the
exact
darling of
quote.
Wall
And you
Street. They
they
said he was the darling of Wall Street.
yeah, yeah, and you see these clips of him at the investor conferences where he's like, "We're going to provide more value-based care. It's more about
Oh, yeah.
less volume, more value," and it just such superficial language that is obviously
Yeah.
going to be attractive to investors because they're going to have to deny claims.
Hmm.
Well, I think this is an important point too, because you do see quite a few clips of Brian Thompson at kind of speaking engagements around film.
It's the only clips you see,
Um,
really.
yeah, and I found this really funny because if you read between the lines, well, he's the CEO of a, multinational or not multinational company. What do you say? Yeah, he's the CEO of a large healthcare corporation, and what these videos are videos of him talking to shareholders, right?
Mhm.
And it's very funny that you only get a clip of I'm Brian Thompson and we're maximizing this, and then it goes mute. And I think that is a very pointed
Yeah.
and correct thing to do from the editor's standpoint, because you know that if you didn't mute him, whatever he's about to say about their business plan is fucking horrible.
Yeah, what is it?
Because
Yeah.
Admission by omission, right?
yeah, because United Healthcare is what it is because it denies healthcare to people. So that the only
Yeah.
thing he could be talking about in those shareholder meetings is how they're finding a creative way to fuck over people and deny claims. That's
And it,
why they can't show anything of him. You know, they don't have any videos of him giving a TED talk about self-betterment. They have him giving TED talks about how they like, oh, this, this single mother of five was denied heart surgery.
Which props to them for actually getting someone
yeah,
on
the
there
the
that,
hysterectomy, right?
yeah.
They had to. Getting ahead of it a little bit, but this is important, I guess, is that we do have one interviewee who is talking about, well, basically someone who was at the wrong end of the stick of United Healthcare, who needed a major surgery. The day before her surgery, they got the word back that United Healthcare had ding, 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 denied her claim by saying that it was not a necessary surgery, right?
Hmm.
So they had to give that one bit of credibility to to the fact of why people fucking hate United Healthcare and why people hate healthcare in the United States in general is because that's what happens. You have some sort of life-saving surgery you need. Your surgeon says you need it. All your all these teams of doctors say you need it. And then when the day comes, and this is how it actually happens, like this poor woman the day before it's supposed to happen, you're all ready to do it and you can't, right? And they do try to, and I think really fail to do some documentary jujitsu here of trying to say, well, people get denied claims, but Brian Thompson was the CEO. He wasn't specifically denying individual claims, which is horseshit. He is absolutely creating the policy
Yep.
that incentivizes, and I would say stronger than incentivizes, forces the people who work under him to deny as many claims as possible. I mean, the thing that people should remember, if you're not aware of it already, is that if you work in a job where you are processing claims for a healthcare company, it is like a black mark on your record every single time you process a claim and approve it. That is not what the
Hmm.
healthcare business is, right?
They have like
So,
reverse quotas or quotas of
yeah,
denial, essentially.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's why United was the worst offender of any of the major healthcare corporations, and none of them are good with like what they had like a rate of like United Healthcare denies a third of claims.
Yeah, and it's not small potatoes. Like, I don't know what people
That is
healthcare premiums are
millions of
so
people.
obfuscated through our like if you pay through your employer, like you pay half, and then if you have a family, you pay like 100% of their portion of it.
Hmm.
You don't get a choice. You have limited options. You have whatever your employer negotiated with the HR people to hunt down some insurance for your company, and you still get denied. Like they're taking money out of your paycheck. Your employer's getting a tax break because they're offering you health care. And also you're locked into your employer. The American healthcare system is
Yeah.
the absolute worst. What was the question you guys had for me?
So Andrew, so there's the portrayal of Brian Thompson. Could you maybe give us how could you could you lay out how they portray Luigi Mangione in his personal journey and how they paint him
Yeah,
as a
so
character in this story?
so like I said, he's like a young guy. He doesn't have a lot of life experience, so they kind of talk about him as his like academic career, and I think they go into, he's clearly a bright guy. They talk about his family, how close his family is, how wealthy his family is. They definitely make a point to talk about that, and then
Yeah.
he kind of goes on this journey. Did he go to Hawaii?
Hawaii,
Was it?
yeah.
Yeah,
Surfing.
and kind of like beach bummed it for a little bit, like, but after college, he took like a gap year and uh apparently banged his yoga teacher, which is
Yeah.
so tight.
I was gonna say like the yoga instructor that they interviewed was
To be
so
fair,
funny. Yeah.
he yeah, the yoga instructor thing was so funny. So no, he didn't bang his yoga teacher. Well, we don't know. I hope he
They
did.
matched on Tinder or whatever.
They matched on Tinder. But yeah, this is another thing about, as you mentioned at the beginning, Andrew, of how thin this entire documentary is, of like they are really scraping the barrel for any kind of content they can, of like you guys have been to fitness classes before, I'm sure. You've been to the gym. Like,
Hmm.
can you imagine like you're killed and then they like are like talking to a guy that you went to yoga classes with? It's like what
Yeah.
the that guy had that guy had zero insight on Luigi. He's just like, yeah, he was very handsome, very fit. The ladies always noticed him. It's like, yeah, we knew that, bro. We didn't we didn't need you to give us that
Yeah, I think
insight.
they're like, yeah, he was a chill dude. The script
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that guy
Yeah,
made it
it's
seem
like
like Luigi went to him for like some sort of like mentoring program. It's like, no,
yeah.
he just took
yeah.
your yoga class like two
It's
times.
like yeah, it was one step away from talking about like talking to the guy who like owned the bodega down the street from Luigi's apartment
Which
building.
my bodega guys could definitely tell you a lot more about me than my coworkers or
I mean, that's true.
Yeah, that's a great
That's
point.
that's yeah, that's a bad example on my part. Your local bodega is your family. They're basically an uncle.
Yeah.
Dan,
That's
if it were you, they'd be interviewing that Justin kid. You always post his stuff, like from our directing class, I believe.
wait, who is this? Oh,
That Justin kid, you're
yeah. Yeah,
it's
that
like
guy.
always on like the most like basic point of view.
God
I
damn.
haven't interacted with him for over 10 years. Yeah.
Piggybacking on that, they go through his, they do make a point of his affluent upbringing. It sounds like he came from a pretty nice family. I remember this was a big thing in the media, was trying to paint the Mangione family as like the Statler family or whatever, which it doesn't
Of
seem
Little
like they
Italy and
are.
Baltimore.
Yeah,
They made them like the
yeah, deep
Corleones.
roots. You, I love the woman who said, "You never really leave Little Italy."
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like I didn't even know Baltimore had a Little Italy, but
Yeah, it's true.
yeah, yeah, Italian strong, Baltimore strong. Um, but yeah, so he had this nice upbringing, kind of golden child, top schools,
Top
Ivy
G.
League education, all of that, top pussy getter, obviously from the yoga instructors. Uh, and this is, I think, the thing that as they're trying to paint this picture of his like descent into madness
Uh,
that just does not land as hard as they try. And we can get into that a little bit because I think the main thing of this documentary, we've already talked about how they completely try and fail to humanize and lionize Brian Thompson, right? Because he seems like a pretty irredeemable character and
Yeah.
there's scant evidence to the
it's
contrary, right?
it
And then
would
as
it
you
would
go,
literally be the easiest thing to do too. Like you just throw
yeah,
a couple like token like him and his family, photos of him at his wedding. I don't know, like
but it doesn't seem like that
they
stuff
can't.
exists.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
it's not there. And then the thing is, what everything that they're throwing in for Luigi, when you're talking about the experience he had, it's like the only thing that the media has been able to throw at him was he was born rich.
Yeah.
But when you look at his lived experience, like he had Lyme disease growing up, which he always suspected, and he talks about it in Reddit post, I guess, that he worried that it messed with his cognition and gave him brain fog, and he was worried about that, which I don't, who knows. And then he had the spinal injury that flared up, especially while he's in Honolulu. And he's talking about how he's getting bounced back and forth between doctors, how no one really believes him. This, I think, was a really telling thing. He's talking to someone on Reddit and he goes, look, if you want to actually get immediate action from a surgeon, you have to talk about being unable to work because we live in a capitalist society. So you need to talk about how it's affecting your ability to work. A doctor does not care about whether or not you're in excruciating pain or your quality of living. It has to be about that. So
Yeah.
there they're bringing up all of this stuff and they're trying to paint it again as I think with the Lyme disease thing too, they try and like paint like some
Yeah.
insanity angle
Mhm.
to it as well. But they're talking about these things that are and trying to make it unrelatable, right? When it is anybody who has dealt with the healthcare system in the United States, the most relatable shit you've ever heard. As City and I were watching this on Saturday, we kept saying like, stop making him look cooler.
Yeah.
Like, stop making him look better. That's the whole thing. And then yeah, and then we'd mentioned before, then they go on to him going backpacking, which I think this is a good time that we introduce probably the most colorful character of Talking Heads in this documentary, if you can call it that, which is criminologist Casey Jordan,
Oh yeah.
who Casey
This
Jordan
is the main
is
woman, right? Talking
yeah,
head. Oh my God.
Casey Jordan is a criminologist who is there for, I guess, no other reason than to make wild assumptions and accusations about Luigi Mangione's psychology, and also at the same time, I guess, completely discredit the study of criminology because the
You have
way
to.
the way that woman talks, the way that woman talks and presenting herself as an expert criminologist
Oh my
made
God.
me someone who's not like super familiar with criminology, but like this made me look at her and go, okay, if this woman's an expert in criminology, then criminology is fucking a junk science like
Yeah.
Yeah.
phrenology or tarot card readings. This woman is she talks about the evidence, quote unquote,
Mm.
about Luigi Mangione's life in the way that like a tabloid columnist would make
Yeah.
assumptions about like whether or not Robert Downey Jr. is back on drugs. Like,
I
She
think.
gave me Nancy Grace vibes.
Yeah.
yeah.
That
I
was
So
think
like
she,
the shrill, like
so
talking down at you, talking
Dan
down at
Abrams
yes.
would.
Luigi. I
I
got
think
that.
Dan Abrams was not as bad, but close.
Yeah. Well,
Dan
so
Abrams
we
actually
also
runs Mediaite, FYI.
yeah, so we
Really?
also yeah, so we have Casey Jordan, and then our other main talking head on this is Dan Abrams, who
Yeah.
runs he's
Law
got
and
like a
crime.
call-in radio show.
Yeah. Yeah. He used to be
Yeah,
an
he's got a
MSNBC host, I think.
yeah. Yeah, so Dan Abrams serves a very different but equally important function for this documentary, which Dan Abrams is there to shame the American people,
Yeah.
similar to the way that a school teacher would shame a bunch of fourth graders who are giggling in the back of class. Dan Abrams is there to go, I know you like Luigi. I know you think he did the right thing. I know you think he was justified, but you should feel bad. And that is the only thing Dan
Yeah.
Abrams uh, does. That's the only function he serves in this. Is like, people think it's cool, but it's actually bad. It's
He
actually, you should actually feel bad about this.
That's a perfect description of him. He wasn't like overtly obnoxious because that other woman just stole the fucking show in terms of just
Yeah.
feeding bullshit and like
Oh yeah.
fake sort of like
Wait, I have to ask,
us
So
getting
get
upset.
do you think
yeah.
that Gurwinder was meant to seem as a spiritual guru to him?
Oh, Gerwinder is the fucking blogger or
Yeah.
whatever.
Like why even bring him
I
into
don't
it?
know who that. Well, this is the thing of, I don't want to get too into the weeds about it, but if you remember back to when we first found out who Luigi was, an assumption from a lot of people, myself included, or I could see that it would be this would have been my guess when we found out who he was I was like, all right, maybe we have like an actual cool action-oriented leftist assassin. That would be really cool. And uh, what we found was that he wasn't, and that really he didn't have a really clear political ideology, right? He was a tech bro who, watched he liked Andrew Huberman, and he kind of read a lot of those self-help, stupid,
They tried to
Atomic
make him right
Minds
wing.
kind of books and stuff. Yeah, they tried to either have him be left wing or right wing, and really he wasn't either of them, which is very
Yeah.
inconvenient for the media when you're talking about him. But this guy Gerwinder, who I've never heard of this guy, and all I know from him from the documentary is that he seems to be like a weird, really niche tech Substack blog guy who, by the way, charges $200 for a subscription. That must be a year subscription. Otherwise, that's fucking criminal.
Yeah.
Uh,
Still a
so
lot for a
he,
year. Jeez.
but he's also not in it enough to get anything from him. This is
I
my
don't remember him at
suspicion.
all,
He's the
but
guy that, yeah, he's
I'm
the
gonna have to
guy
see a
that,
photo.
It's
yeah,
not gonna
he's the
help.
guy that
Pretty nondescript.
Yeah, you don't know him. You don't know him, and you really don't see much of him. And my suspicion is, which is I think my suspicion for a lot of this documentary is that they would try to have people come in, and there's no way to look at the facts of this case and not make you like Luigi Mangione more and more and more, right?
Mm.
So anyway, can we get back to Luigi's metamorphosis, should we say? Because I got onto this because of Casey Jordan. So we get onto him going backpacking, which I thought was really funny that Casey Jordan, in her very scientific anthropological way, called this a pilgrimage. Like she really made it seem like the motherfucker was like a 24-year-old, 23-year-old who's got a lot of money and was going
Yeah.
backpacking through Asia. And she called it a pilgrimage. She made it sound like he had like converted to Islam in prison and then was like going to Mecca.
This is he was an Islamic terrorist, yeah.
Cut out pork.
Yeah.
He doesn't drink anymore. Yeah.
So we
Yes.
go into that, and then we get into, you guys might remember from we're getting closer to the murder. So this is after he's done with his stint in abroad. So he had talked to this Gerwinder guy via Zoom and had just been in Japan, and he was worried about like he was like, oh, the Japanese really seem like NPCs, this is where I really get
Oh,
that like he
right,
just
right.
has he just has tech bro ideology. He doesn't really have like uh he doesn't have like a left wing or right wing radical ideology. He was just kind of, and this is kind of a dumb guy take, to be honest. No offense, Luigi, but like he kind of thought Japanese people were NPCs just because Japanese culture has a huge premium on being polite and following the rules and like everyone kind of taking care of each other. So maybe
Yeah.
that's what he got from it. But so this is the Asia trip happens right before he comes home and then is kind of off the grid for 6 months before Brian Thompson is killed. And in this time, uh, he is still posting reviews on Goodreads. So he's the one person I've ever heard of who actually does that. And the big thing they spend a lot of time on to try and construct their case of Luigi being a madman is that he reviews Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber's manifesto.
Probably the
Um,
best manifesto, like the manifesto that holds up the most
Listen, I
in our
haven't read
society.
it. I haven't read it in full, but every quote I've ever heard from it goes so fucking hard. Like it's good shit. All of it's good shit. And I think a thing that's disingenuous too about the way they bring this up is so he wrote this review in January 2024, right? And they really make it seem like he was just out researching domestic terrorists, completely not taking into account what was it the year before Ted Kaczynski had died. So
Oh,
remember, it became a huge thing. Like it became a huge meme. It was all over TikTok and stuff. So like Luigi didn't need to search to find Ted Kaczynski. Ted Kaczynski and the manifesto had a big resurgence the year before anyway. after he died. And anyway, I won't go into his review of it, but one of the most important parts of it, and by the way, in the review, Luigi is multiple times saying, I don't condone what he did, and it's right that he's in prison and that kind of stuff. But he brings up I'm paraphrasing here, but he brings up a line from the Unabomber Manifesto talking about how protest and how peaceful protest does not work, economic protest is not possible, violent protest is the only viable path. And they try to really make this into, the words of an absolute lost soul, the fact that he could read this crazy thing and latch onto it. And to you out there, dear listener, tell me if you read history, show me the lie. Is there anything wrong about that statement? I mean, this is why everyone was hard on Ted Kaczynski's manifesto, because like, what the fuck is wrong about that? We know in our modern day, we've seen Black Lives Matter, we've seen Gaza protests, we've seen Occupy Wall Street, we've seen peaceful protests. It doesn't fucking work. And the world we live in, yeah, I don't think there is a way to do economic protests in any meaningful way.
Yeah,
It's
it's really
impossible.
tough. Yeah.
So if you're going to tell me that violent protest isn't the way, well, I don't know. Look at every successful revolution in history.
Yeah.
It wasn't peaceful, and it
Yep.
wasn't coming from boycotting,
Yeah, P&G.
your local stores, right?
Did you, and this is why like an economic protest will never work, I guess. And maybe in the United States there was like a shop local protest, like don't shop at Walmart for a day.
Yeah, Friday.
Yeah.
Last Friday.
I didn't even know about it. I'm kind of tuned in. Like,
Uh,
so
yeah.
I don't know, but also I just don't think one, there's enough people that are gonna do it. And then I don't think it just the messaging, I think honestly like a work stoppage would be pretty powerful.
Yeah.
But anyways, Ben, I think you're right. Like it's very hard to argue that any of
Yeah.
these other forms of protest are really going to be useful.
Yeah. So from here, we're midway through the documentary and continually making Luigi look cooler and cooler and cooler and making all of these people look like fucking idiots and apple polishing fucking nerds for trying to make us not like him. Um, So we get to going back to Brian Thompson. We're leading up to the murder, so this is again the time to try and humanize him. So we go into, yes, an old family friend who brings up, as you said, Dan, Watermelon Day in Stanhope, Iowa, which I don't know if you didn't grow up in a small Midwestern town.
Did you grow up at all?
Well, they all have some version of this, right? The fact that his mom was
Yeah.
the ticket lady at Watermelon Day, which, by the way, this story has nothing to do with him. He was probably like 6 years old when this story happened. It's like, yeah, it's like there's probably like fucking 3,000 people in that town. Like,
Yeah.
what else is there to fucking do? They should have never said that he was a Wall Street darling.
Yeah, that guy they interviewed, was he the former CEO of United?
And then also,
Oh,
this was
right.
something I had forgotten about. We found out after he was killed that there was a bunch of suspicion of him doing insider trading.
Yeah.
They barely touched on it, right? Or did they touch on it at all?
They
Yeah.
they mention it. They
They
mention it in
mention it.
passing. This
Yeah.
is
I
the
mean,
thing.
it's their
like,
attempt to be balanced.
yeah, but it's like you can't talk about this guy and say anything good. There's
Yeah.
nothing good to be. And
Did they
also,
bring
I don't want to be a Casey Jordan here and just operate completely on conjecture, but I don't think it's that outlandish to say that if you have come from a working class background and you have been able to work your way up to be the CEO of the most nefarious healthcare provider in the United States, I think it's pretty safe bet that you're not a good guy. I don't think you get there by being a nice person. So any of this, and I think the evidence in this documentary confirms that. I am pretty comfortable saying that this guy was an absolute piece of shit.
I think that's where they fail, right? Like, because they show Brian Thompson, like, those like old, like rustic 70s, like kind of photographs of him and his family and
It
like
was
their middle
totally
class
video
home.
editing.
And then they build his story up like, oh, he pulled himself up by his bootstraps, and goddamn, do Americans love that? They eat it up. And so
Well,
like he
this is the
was
thing.
a
The only thing they could say was like, this is like four people were like, he was very hardworking, he was very successful. So was
yeah.
Bernie Madoff. Like, so, like
But they did the opposite for Luigi. They said came from such privilege, and this is
Yeah.
all, just to make us like think of him in a more classist way. It's like, oh, he
yeah,
had privilege, he came from a rich family. But that's what makes him fucking awesome,
yeah,
is
exactly.
because he saw the injustice. I
Yeah,
mean, albeit he was exposed to it tangentially, or actually pretty directly, just by the system, but he could have afforded these surgeries out of pocket probably, but he just saw
yeah.
the injustice and thought it was not fair, it was not ethical,
Well,
and he did
going
something about it.
Yeah, going back to what I said at the beginning of this, I remember, and this is where I think the media blackout came from when they couldn't manufacture consent against Luigi Mangione, is I remember very clearly people trying to post about this, of going, look at the background of Brian Thompson. He started working class and he went to a state school and he worked his way up and stuff. And this kid, Luigi, he was born of everything. He went to a private school, one of the most prestigious private schools in the nation. Then he goes to UPenn, which I don't know, UPenn, not that impressive for me, but whatever. Went to an Ivy League school. So it's like, who are you on the side? They tried to play the
Yeah,
class
yeah.
side the different way. They're like, actually, if you worry about class politics, you should be on the side of the CEO because he was born that way.
Nope.
And it was like, oh, you guys really don't understand what
How this works.
class, you
Yeah,
don't understand what class solidarity means, do you? You just don't get the concept. Because it's
yeah,
like,
Brian Thompson was a
actually,
fucking class traitor is what he was.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what he was.
I can't
So
believe
it's a,
I just can't believe HBO put their name to this. It was such a rushed, cheap documentary.
Yeah,
oh,
I,
it feels like
uh,
local news.
yeah, it
It
really
feels really
does.
cheap.
it's worse than 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
So we only have a little bit left to get through, and then we can kind of do a wrap up of it. But I just wanted to get, so obviously we get into the thing that more of us know the story of the actual alleged murder, right? Finally, we said alleged in this. Uh, so onto the murder, we know that it was a printed gun. We know that Luigi was a an engineer, so having to know how to do that. We know like how fucking badass the killing looked. The fact that you have this. I mean, I remember when I saw the video the first time, I assumed it was like a Navy SEAL, or some sort of person with actual
They
military.
were talking about how he knew how to unjam the gun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Mhm.
But like you remember you've seen the footage. I mean, it
Oh
looks
yeah.
like a professional. When I first
Hmm.
saw the footage, I was like, that's a vet. So it's even cooler that it wasn't, allegedly. And we also know that Luigi said in his supposed letter to the feds that he had thought about using a bomb, but he didn't want to have collateral damage. He wanted to be specific about that.
Hmm.
So we get to the killing, right? And this is where I want to bring back in our two talking heads of, again, people trying so hard to make it not seem like the most awesome assassination ever, straight out of John Wick. Uh, we first have, I just love this from Casey Jordan, our fabulist in chief criminologist, is basically saying, like, trying to paint him as this narcissist for doing this. Like it's clear narcissism. And and she's saying like, "Oh, so Luigi thinks this has to be done and I'm the only person smart enough and brave enough to do it." And well, he did it.
He did it.
He was right. If that's
Yeah.
what he thought, he was he made the gun, he practiced how to do it, and he had the balls to you know what? Take a poll of the American public. How many people, if you were like, okay, magic wand, you get to clip off this healthcare CEO,
Yeah, no
and you
consequences.
and you know you'll get away with it? How many people would say they do it, right?
Yeah.
Luigi, Luigi did it for
I
all
but
of
he
us.
and he is a smart guy, obviously, but like what
Yeah,
is up with him using like all the and we're probably going to go to the trial and find out that all this information that we were fed through the media is bullshit, but they said that
yeah.
they found the same ID. He had the same ID that he checked into the hotel with. It's like I don't believe that. They didn't
I
talk
mean,
about
I
the
don't
Monopoly
trust.
money in the fucking park. I don't even know if that's real.
I'm willing to bet the Monopoly money is not real. I mean, none of the like a lot of the this is, going off on a tangent, but
Yeah,
like
yeah, sorry.
the way they found his gun and his bag, the way the cops searched the gun and all that stuff, like the way they didn't follow protocol, like makes all that evidence technically inadmissible.
Yeah, I saw that
Like,
Damn.
his Pennsylvania lawyer is trying to I forgot. Yeah, make it admissible.
yeah, I mean, honestly, this is why I want to talk to a lawyer about this because from what I can tell, like all of the evidence, especially like this documentary is like case in point, like all of the evidence is kind of inadmissible and should be thrown out.
He's not a threat to like society, to be honest.
No.
Like he's not gonna get like I would let this guy watch my kids. I don't have kids, but I'm sure I
Yeah.
would.
So just on the so we have there's Casey Jordan going full on psychology mode. This guy is a textbook narcissist because he thought he was the only person for the job. He was the only person for the job and also the only person that did that job and fulfilled it. So, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, Casey. Like, correct. He was the only man for the job and he deserves that narcissism if he has it. The other thing is going back to our fucking Catholic nun Dan Abrams tries to take a different angle to this, where he's going, Luigi shot him in the back.
Yeah,
Oh
so
yeah.
You'd think he would go up to him and say, this is what you've done. This is what like for Dan Abrams, Dan Abrams has been watching too much fucking West Wing apparently and thinks that like Luigi had to like go and turn him around and give him an epic speech that I guess he
Yeah.
live streams. Oh, by the way, I think we skipped over this. But this was a funny thing that Dan Abrams talks about later because Dan Abrams has a call-in show in New York and he was trying to do this scolding shit. And then for like a week, he was just getting people calling in, yelling at him,
Yeah.
yeah,
being
that
like,
was great.
Well, they
hero.
tried to high road it. Both of these people and Dan Abrams, yeah, like you said, I forget how'd you describe him earlier? That was fucking perfect. A teacher who's like, you shouldn't be laughing at this. This isn't funny.
Yeah.
Polishing
Like that's
apples, I think you said.
you had a lot of good ones. But yeah, I mean everyone's down, and I think the only way, like you said it a few times too, is just to black it out because they've tried a few
Yeah.
different ways to make Luigi look bad. That's not gonna work. They try
You
to
you
make
really have to
Brian
search for
Thompson look good.
information about the case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm
This is
fine
the
with
thing.
that. Like the mystery's kind of solved. There's gonna be a trial, and then it's all
Allegedly.
gonna come. Well, yeah, yeah. But the trial's gonna come, and then I'm fine waiting till then. I think this whole like
Yeah,
revealing stuff drip by drip is bullshit, and we know that it's like a tactic from the prosecution.
yeah, and they've
Yeah.
clearly lost. No matter what they say, it feels like they
I
can't
hope
win
he
the
gets
public on
jury
this one.
nullification.
Well, that's
I
the thing is
I
really
mean,
this
hope.
documentary on a like on an ethical level, which obviously, when the fuck did any of these people care about the ethics of it? Oh, by the way, we didn't even mention he's only in it for a hot second, but it is fucking amazing and hilarious that Mayor of New York City, Eric Adams,
oh yeah,
is in the documentary. I mean, obviously, there's not much to read into that. He was there at the perp walk. He didn't need to be there. Eric Adams is just a baller who loves being in front of the camera. Enough
Yeah, he
said.
is.
I mean, that's the only reason he's there. He's not a litigator. He's not like he is like the mayor has nothing to do with the trial. There's no reason he should be
Yeah, he
there.
doesn't give a
But I mean,
shit.
it's perfectly on brand for Eric Adams to be there just talking shit. Well, no, yeah, also Eric Adams for it. He's just kind of talking about like an epidemic of youth violence, which like I don't know if there's anything to
Is that
support
true?
that, but
I
I
don't
don't
think
think
so.
so. I don't know. Eric Adams is my favorite crazy person in American politics. Like he's just out there fucking. Eric Adams should be yelling at people on the like on the subway of the A train. He should have never come to prominence.
Wait,
Uh,
we should be conscious of time. We should wrap it up.
yeah. So I guess the last thing that we get from this documentary is kind of all the people, which was, if it really feels like it was pushed by the producers. They really try to wrap up the message of this, and the only thing they can get into is like you can't ignore the media storm that happened after it and the outpouring of um adoration and love and support that you got from the American public. We've talked about it before. I mean, it's completely unifying. Left,
Yeah.
right, center, young, old, everyone loved him. And then the fact that he is, again, objectively beautiful made it even more amazing, right? That's why we had to have the blackout. So they're talking about, girls sending Luigi pictures, everyone sending, money to his legal defense and his commissary and stuff, and trying to bring the class stuff into this, like he can afford it on his own or whatever,
Didn't
completely
his
missing the
lawyer
point.
say like stop sending nudes because the
Yeah,
cops are
yeah.
looking at him first?
Yeah, yeah. And also only send 5 pictures. There's too many. Uh, so the last thing they do to try to condemn Luigi is say because he's so handsome, the cause has become more about him as a cult of personality,
Yeah.
as a symbol, than it has about the cause. I don't buy that. I think it's just another way to try to discredit him. And even if that was the case, it's not his fucking fault. Can't hate him because he's beautiful.
You can have two thoughts at the same time.
Yeah. But I don't think that's true. I think that's meme culture firstly. People are also just having fun making Italian jokes about him being named Luigi, uh,
Yeah.
which is also hilarious. But yeah, anyway, that is in a nutshell what the episode is. I don't know, what do we have for final thoughts?
I just want to say that segment was probably longer than the documentary.
The definitive story of Luigi has not been written yet.
Hmm.
This week, we're speaking of Rania Khalek. Rania Khalek is a Lebanese-American journalist, host, presenter, just all-around cool person, honestly. You can find her at Breakthrough News as the host of Dispatches. Highly recommend watching that. She's great. I'm so excited for you guys to watch this one. Rania Khalek, thank you so much for joining us. This is Villain for All Seasons. I'm Dan.
Ben?
Rania, I'm sure you've heard No Other Land won Best Documentary at the Academy Awards last night. Do you view this as a sea change about Palestine or the Middle East, or do you think it's just a one-off?
I mean, I guess we have to look at it like in a longer context. I think people will look back at this years from now and see it as part of a series of that sea change you just mentioned. I mean, I know the last time there was the Oscars, there was that movie Zone of Interest, I think. Was it the Oscars
Right.
that
Yeah.
had won? And I know the director wasn't Israeli, but he was Jewish and he like got up and made a speech and specifically made a parallel to Gaza, which was really, cool and brave of him to do. And he got totally dunked on by Hollywood afterwards. So I think that this is part of that ongoing sea change, I guess. I know some people were frustrated because you had a Palestinian man and then the Israeli, I don't know if it was one of the producers or they directed it together. You can correct me on that. But I know the Israeli guy had made some comments that were good, but also irritated some people because he compared Palestinian suffering to Israeli suffering, talked about October 7th being this big crime. And it's just like, come on, dude. But it's still
Yeah.
important that ethnic cleansing got mentioned. But I also think it speaks to the fact that, had Palestinian filmmaker who it was his story, been alone in that and spoken that way on his own, I'm not sure if people would have received it the same way. And it just speaks to the fact that a lot of white liberals still need an Israeli to like humanize Palestinians for them to some degree. I hope that changes at some point. That said, I think it's important ethnic cleansing was mentioned. And I think in the broader scheme of things, I think more things like this will continue to happen because people are just so disgusted by what Israel does to Palestinians quite openly.
I mean, yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, speaking of, this is a good segue just to really dive into the real big news about things beyond Hollywood. Rania, I know that you're based in Lebanon, and I definitely want to get into that a little bit later, but obviously want to keep zooming in on Palestine here. Can you talk about Israel's recent decision to just halt all aid delivery to Palestine?
Yeah, I mean, they're doing exactly what they did in the beginning. Remember when Yoav Gallant, like a few days after October 7th, openly said, we're basically shutting down Gaza, no food, no electricity, no water. And a lot of the world was horrified by that, but you saw the Americans under Biden basically say, no, 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 we don't agree with that, but that's not what they're actually doing. And the Europeans did something similar and then just made it all about Hamas. And then we're seeing like 2.0 of that now. I mean, Israel, since the ceasefire went into effect, they didn't want the ceasefire. It was forced on them. It was forced on them to some degree by facts on the ground. But most importantly, it was forced on them by Donald Trump because Trump wanted to enter office having like this win and not having to deal with a war that he saw as Biden's war. That was just like a headache. So Israel was forced into this ceasefire and they never intended for it to be permanent from the beginning. They said so, that their officials say so. They never intended for this to be permanent. And since the ceasefire went into place, the Israelis have tried every way imaginable to undermine it. And now they're doing that with the support of the Trump administration because now the Trump administration's like, fine, I don't care anymore. You got most of the hostages back. And like we wanted to look like the winners who came and saved the day. And we already did that. And they absolutely support Israel shutting off Gaza. They said so. They're like, Israel has every right to do this, which is, obviously, against international law. But what does that mean anymore? I think it's interesting also to see the reaction the second time around. The first time around, it horrified everybody. The second time around, we're all horrified, but we're like, yeah, that makes sense because there's no international law, or even a pretense of it. And then you have the Europeans coming out and also blaming Hamas when Israel just like blatantly is the one violating the ceasefire and you can go and track it. It's clear. So ultimately, this is what the Israelis wanted to do. They wanted to continue. And actually, I think what we're going to see happen, I mean, I can't predict the future, but based on this trajectory, I mean, the Israelis basically just are going to leave Gaza in this, the status quo is going to become like what it is right now, where people just live in rubble. They're not going to be able to be rebuilt. They're going to die off. Like people in Gaza are going to continue to die from like preventable diseases. Israel's going to occasionally bomb them. That's probably not going to be as vicious as what we witnessed over the past 15 months. But they're just like they've been doing throughout the ceasefire. They're going to do drone strikes here and there. They're going to shoot at people in the areas they're still stationed. And they're not going to allow them to rebuild their homes. And so I think you're going to see a Gaza siege that's like on steroids of what we witnessed over like 15 years, where it's the siege on Gaza, but way worse. And also people having no shelter and just having to like live in rubble. And it's horrifying because the world is going to allow that to happen for a bit longer.
Rania, I want to talk about Assel Rod, something that she recently tweeted. I really like following her, and I think that you retweeted this as well. And you spoke to this just a little bit, but just to drive home the point, she tweeted, "Remember when the Biden administration told you Israel wasn't blocking aid to Gaza?" And I'm just curious, how is the Biden administration, how were they seen in Lebanon? And from your perspective, did you expect Biden to align this closely with Netanyahu?
Those are really good questions. And yeah,
Thank you.
big Ursula Rad fan here. She's
Yeah,
fantastic. Okay, to the first issue that you asked about, which is how people in Lebanon perceived the Biden administration. Lebanon's a really polarized place, so it depends. But a lot of people, including people who aren't even pro-resistance, were really disgusted by the genocide in Gaza. And I think recognized that they're not seen that differently by the Americans than people in Palestine are. And then it was made even worse by the escalation that took place in Lebanon. And they see, like, a lot of people in Lebanon will tell you, and again, I want to clarify, like, I can't speak for everyone here because it is a very divided place with some people who do support Trump and hate Palestinians and want to make peace with Israel. But I would say that that's a marginal view, but it does exist here. But a lot of people, even ones that surprised me, would say things to me like, oh, both these parties are the same. It doesn't matter who's in charge, Democrat or Republican. They all just bomb us. That's how they see it. It's pretty, which is true. um, so they perceive the Biden administration as just being like, America's the dictator of the world. Everyone kind of understands that in the global South, right? Like, why else does it matter who's president there? No matter where you live in the world, unlike anywhere else in the world. But also, it's dictator of the world that will always bomb the Middle East constantly and always interfere in the Middle East and kill people in the Middle East and has like a genocidal drive in the Middle East and will always back anything Israel wants. That's how Israel's seen. As for what was the second thing you asked me? Sorry.
Just did you expect Biden to align so closely with
Oh,
Netanyahu?
so no, not like this. I mean, did I expect Biden to like stand in the way of Israel ethnically cleansing Palestinians? No, because my entire life, not whatever party's in charge, that is what happens, and it continues to happen because Israel is an extension of the United States, and that's why it can get away with whatever it wants because this is, in service of American imperialism. That said, I did think there'd be some daylight because of the fact that Netanyahu is Likud, and Likud is very much aligned with Republicans. Whereas the Democratic Party in the US is, as much as they act like Republicans, they're not quite as, messianic as they are. And they just do imperialism a little bit differently. So, I thought when Biden became president in 2020, I was surprised that he basically carried on Trump's policies that Democrats claim to oppose. And then on top of that, like, I really thought there would be limits. Like, yeah, I thought Israel would get away with maybe like 2 or 3 months of just viciously murdering Palestinians in Gaza. I didn't think it'd go on for 15 months. Like, I think I was definitely blown away by the depravity of the Biden administration. And not just Biden, because Biden was kind of like a shell of himself anyway,
Yep.
very ideologically Zionist, but like who was really running the show was like people like Jake Sullivan and Brett McGurk and I can't remember the names of the others, but they're all just
Matthew
disgusting
Miller.
monsters. Thank you, Matthew Miller. I mean, these are people that, I only wish the worst for them in life. And if karma really is a thing, like they'll all get some horrible disease and die slow, torturous deaths because it's just these people are like a bunch of mini Hitlers as far as I'm concerned.
Mhm.
And I think that was the lesson to me watching the Biden administration and all the people in it do what they did over Gaza. Not that I ever thought any of these people gave a shit about like human rights or international law or the things they claim to care about. Just they usually have a veneer of that,
Mhm.
And I also just didn't understand how genocidal they are. Like I really like
Yeah.
it's they I think they actually like have this deep-seated genocidal drive towards a significant part of the world. And it was demonstrated to me throughout the Biden administration in such a shocking way to the point where, I mean, we all watched it, you guys. Like we saw Israelis like let dogs maul a mentally disabled Palestinian man on camera. Like we saw like the reading out of what happened at the end of that guy's life. We saw, Hind, what happened with Hind Rajab and like heard her screams. We saw the Israelis leave premature babies to starve to death intentionally. We saw them wearing the lingerie of, in women's houses that they, destroyed. We saw them on video raping a Palestinian prisoner. And then we saw them go on TV and defend it and say they're going to do it more. Like, and it just goes on and on and on. And there's nothing. That's what I learned. There's nothing the Israelis can do to a Palestinian or to an Arab that's unacceptable to the people in charge of US empire. Nothing, even for the purposes of PR, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think once we were dispelled of like the pretense that there actually was a president in charge, because we all knew, right? We all knew that Biden was not there. So it was a real kind of look behind the curtain of what happens when we know that whoever the president is actually isn't running the show, and we don't need to pretend he's running the show because we don't need to make him look good or get reelected or anything. And yeah, I think the same. I think that's what the empire really wants to do when it's allowed to.
One thing before we leave Biden, I thought it was way past the point. He might have even past the election at this point, but there's that photo of him holding Kaladi's book. I'm sure I pronounced his name wrong, but the Hundred Years' War Against Palestine. Do you remember that? What was the
Yeah.
purpose of that? I mean, is he just like a, forgive the phrase, was this his like road to Damascus moment here?
I honestly don't know. Like, I don't even know if he can read at this point. And
Yeah.
I'm being a little bit funny when I say that, but I actually mean that. Like, the guy is so far gone. I mean, if you've ever seen an elderly person with dementia, it's what Joe Biden exhibits. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here diagnosing him, but definitely he's got some form. Like the way he just stares into like nothingness. It's sad actually to watch. Like if he wasn't Hitler in my mind, I'd feel bad for him, but because he is, I don't.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I don't know if that was like meant to troll people.
It felt like
I
that.
don't know
That
if
was
it
my
was meant
guess.
to. Yeah, because it was after the election, right? Like that happened after
Yeah.
the election. So
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't really gain anything from this. Like Arabs already hate you. They're never gonna like you. So, this is no one's looking at that and going, oh, maybe he sees us now. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I think it was probably honestly the more pessimistic side of me or cynical side of me thinks it was a sick joke by one of his aides.
Yeah. It feels like that.
That's my guess.
Yeah.
Ronnie, I want to talk a little bit about Syria. I think you've been really good on this, and I'd love to hear your takes on it, specifically with this context, which is right after Assad fell. Really, the American left seemed divided, or maybe said better. There was this opinion that the left really couldn't simultaneously believe that Assad was despotic, but also believing the West had long wanted to try and overthrow him, and did try to overthrow him because of his alignment with the Palestinian cause. What were your thoughts on Assad?
Well, so I've never been shy about saying it. And ultimately, there was a period of time where I wasn't let into Syria because I would say it, even though I get called an Assadist. I'm sure you've seen like all the time.
I read your
It's
Wikipedia.
actually, yeah. Well, but isn't that crazy though? My Wikipedia, like, it's funny, just on a little like tangent. My Wikipedia initially got deleted years ago because Zionists wouldn't leave it alone. They kept vandalizing it so that the first line would say like Rania Khalek is a Putin-loving like Assadist anti-Semite or something. It was just like ridiculous language, bombastic language like that. And I kept like emailing Wikipedia and being like, look, like I know I have no control over my own page, but this is like slander. And it's the first thing people see when they Google me. And they couldn't prevent the vandalism, so they just deleted the page. So recently I noticed a new Wikipedia page cropped up and under like my career, it's literally just trips I took to Syria. So I'm just like, this is like a blip in everything I've done as a journalist. But okay, I guess that's my career now, is I went to Syria and people were mad at me, which just shows you like people just will never let that go. But no, so look, I'm Lebanese-American, but I have family in Syria as well. Like a lot of people do, because these borders are, colonial borders that were drawn in between our families' villages. And so I have like a connection to Syria in that respect. And I obviously like used to be really big in like I was at the Electronic Intifada. I was always covering Palestine, but it was when Hillary Clinton was about to be elected president, or so I thought. She was saying one of the first things she was going to do was a no-fly zone in Syria. And I was really scared about what that meant because I have family in Syria. They're from a minority sect, and like that would have meant like really horrible people taking over the country who were carrying out atrocities against my own relatives. So that's initially why I started covering Syria, but I've always been very clear. Syria has always been a police state. I grew up knowing it was a police state. I grew up knowing they were occupying Lebanon. And Syria, under the Assad family, was a country that was full of contradictions. On the one hand, Hafez al-Assad especially, like they, sometimes they were on the side of the Palestinians, sometimes they helped the Americans. They were a very self-interested country, always to the benefit of Syria, at least until, Bashar al-Assad fled. Or maybe even before that. But again, a country full of contradictions. And also, everyone knew growing up that Syria was this kind of like almost like cartoonish police state where you just like had to be really careful what you said, like the walls have ears sort of place. And it was like that. There's no question. Really politically repressive. That said, in the Syria under the Assads, you also did have a kind of pluralism. and a safeguarding of like Syria's history and culture that was really important. It's social fabric. And you know, before Bashar al-Assad like introduced neoliberal reforms in like the early 2000s, Syria was a place where everything was really free and affordable. And that kind of like slowly disintegrated from some really stupid privatization reforms that gave rise to the uprising to some degree in 2011, but also got worse after war and sanctions. So I guess I say all that to say Syria was a brutal place, but also a beautiful place. And Syria, I mean, Syria, I'm sure I haven't been there since Assad. I actually haven't been to Syria since 2019. But Syria is still, I'm sure, a beautiful place, but it's going through a very difficult time now because the people who took over, not all of them, but a lot of them have very, you know, sectarian views. And they also want to get revenge on people they feel, you know, carried out atrocities against their uprising, their opposition movement, their, you know, militancy. And that has a sectarian basis to it. And then also there's foreign fighters there from like other parts of the world who have really disgusting views about how Syria should run, and they're carrying out atrocities. And then on top of that, you have Turkey that's basically like totally controlling the levers of power in Syria to the benefit of Turkey, not Syria. And the economy is just in like crumbling right now for a lot of reasons, not just the sanctions, but also because Syria has just opened its market completely under Ahmed al-Sharaa. So I don't know. It remains to be seen. It's in a transitional period, but Syria doesn't look good. And then you have the Israelis, which are a whole nother can of worms in Syria. And you have the new Syrian government under Ahmed al-Sharaa, like just kind of shrugging their shoulders and being like, whatever, as the Israelis literally seize Syrian land. So it's kind of a disaster. It's really bad for Lebanon and for resistance in the region. And yeah, all to take it back to, I'm happy to say more about Assad, but it's a country that was full of contradictions and ultimately was abandoned by a very corrupt leader who didn't really know how to lead and who kind of betrayed his people in many ways.
Rania, I want to talk a little bit about Sharaa, and just before we leave, like what for our listeners, can you give a little bit of background on him and you know really the overthrow of Assad? Yeah, we'll start there and then maybe dive in a little bit more.
So Ahmed al-Sharaa is an interesting character because if you read the mainstream media right now about him, it's like he had an interesting journey in life with lots of phases. You know, we all go through phases, you guys.
Yeah.
For some of us, that phase could be joining Al-Qaeda for a period of time in our lives. You know, it's just something you do when you're stupid and young. You don't really know what Al-Qaeda is. No, Mohammed al-Jolani is a Syrian guy whose family is originally from the Golan. But from what I understand, he was born in Saudi Arabia, but grew up in Damascus. I actually knew people who went to high school with him. He's a young guy. He's like, for somebody who's the leader of a country, I think he's 42 years old. So if anybody's approaching 40, you should feel very unaccomplished if you haven't done what Mohammed al-Jolani's done, or sorry, Ahmed al-Sharaa. But this is somebody who in, you know, the early 2000s got swept up in the whole Salafi jihadi move to go to Iraq, to go fight in Iraq with Al-Qaeda. And that's important to mention, you know, the US war in Iraq, that was supposedly to go find weapons of mass destruction, but also because somehow Saddam Hussein was responsible for 9/11, which apparently like 40% of Americans still sadly believe. There was never Al-Qaeda in Iraq until after the Americans invaded. And then this guy called Zarqawi went to Iraq to fight, started Al-Qaeda, and that was started Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and that was actually when Al-Qaeda had a bit of a transformation and became a very sectarian organization that was obsessed with basically eliminating Shias specifically. And Iraq was like, you know, majority Shia. And he committed horrible atrocities. So Ahmed al-Sharaa is, you know, in Damascus, and he sees the war in Iraq getting started, and he decides to go to Iraq and fight with Al-Qaeda because it was a phase in his life. I think he was like probably 18 or 19 years old. And so he did that for a period of time when Al-Qaeda had its most brutal, I mean, it was a brutal, not that it ever wasn't a brutal organization, but like Al-Qaeda was just vicious, like terrorizing people for being Shia in Iraq. Car bombs, blowing up mosques, blowing up marketplaces. I mean, in addition, to fighting the American occupiers as well. But it was a very Sunni supremacist movement in Iraq. And Ahmed al-Sharaa eventually ends up getting captured by the Americans and imprisoned. And he, you know, he did his prison time in a few different American prison sites, including like Camp Bucca, and a few others as well. And actually, there is suspicion that he was like became like an informant for the Americans at some point during that time, but nobody could really prove it. But who knows, right? When you go into an American prison and then you come out, an American prison in the Middle East and come out, it's kind of weird, but okay, whatever. He's basically in Al-Qaeda, and then 2011 comes. Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Then 2011 comes, and Mr. Baghdadi, the head of, Islamic State in Iraq, which, becomes ISIS, sees the uprising in Syria as an opportunity and dispatches Mohammed al-Jolani, the Syrian, to go like start a branch in Syria and basically take advantage of the momentum behind overthrowing the Assad regime. And that's how you get Jabhat al-Nusra, which was started by Mohammed Jalani. It's the al-Qaeda branch in Syria. And it's operating in Syria by late 2011. And that's according to American intelligence. And he's committing atrocities, by the way. This isn't like, oh, we just want to like save the people from Assad, the butcher. It's like same thing, car bombs, blowing shit up, assassinating people, killing civilians, terrorizing them. And that extended into Lebanon, by the way, and ultimately into Iraq, because then you had the rise of ISIS. And actually, Baghdadi and Jolani end up splitting because they had a difference of opinion about strategy. So Jolani's head of Jabhat al-Nusra splits from ISIS. ISIS is in the hands of Baghdadi. And now these are two kind of competing organizations in any area in Syria where the government was pushed out. These are the organizations that would come and take over because they were the most powerful, most ideologically driven, and had the most fighters and most money. And so this is Jolani's life for a while, heading Jabhat al-Nusra, building and all that, all that jazz, this phase of his life. And ultimately he loses. And you had that time, that period of time where you had the green buses in Syria, where like all the opposition fighters would basically surrender to the regime for safe passage from the areas they had taken over to go to Idlib. And that's what happened to a lot of the Nusra guys and Al-Qaeda guys and, like all the different like armies that existed, Jaish al-Islam, all these, the Ahrar al-Sham, like a million different names for a million different militias that all had the same ideology, end up in Idlib. And then the conflict is kind of frozen in 2019. And Jolani is in Idlib and basically spends 2019 until late last year consolidating power. And trying to rebrand himself as like a statesman who's basically in charge of governing Idlib. And he did a pretty good job, by the way, of rebranding himself and of also consolidating power in a pretty brutal way, but he did it. And then came late last year when the Turks took advantage of the weakening of the resistance axis because of the war Israel had inflicted on Lebanon against Hezbollah, and uses that as an opportunity to try to leverage the power they had behind Jolani to get the Assad regime to play ball with them. And it was wildly successful, I think, beyond even Turkey's dreams. And then you have Jolani, coming into Damascus within a couple weeks. And now he's their leader. And here we are. That's like an abridged version. And now he's been, he's got, I don't know. I joke that Boston Consulting Group is like advising him on how to dress and how to behave. He's definitely being advised. I mean, I know he actually has a stylist, and he's done a really good job.
You know he has a stylist?
Yeah. So it was like reported that he has a stylist. Or like the people who support him.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not surprised. Like it's like he's wearing expensive clothes and like he looks very different. Like there's, the phases of Jolani going back to his roots of Ahmed al-Shara. And then he just goes and gives these interviews where he completely papers over his time in Al-Qaeda. And he literally, there was an interview with CNN before they had taken over Damascus, but I think at that point they'd had like Aleppo and Homs, where he like sits there and describes it as a journey. And everybody changes, everybody evolves. You're one person in your 20s, you're another person in your 30s, and you're certainly different and more mature in your 40s. And I'm just sitting here like, this is insane. This guy was he was a deputy emir in ISIS. And now he's the head of Syria and we're all supposed to cheer him. It's insane.
I remember college, crazy stuff happens.
I had bangs once.
Oh God.
So think about Jelani/Shara. I'm trying to be optimistic, and I say this just because I see accounts on X, Twitter, whatever, by like Sarah XO and Syria Girl, and they even posted it was over New Year's, and they were posting the celebrations, the New Year's Eve celebrations. I was like, wow, even pretty hardliners against, Western imperialism, etc., are trying to view this as an optimistic moment. What do you think the ideal outcome is in Syria at this point?
I mean, look, I think the ideal outcome for Syria, just like any other part of the region, would be for Syria to have the sovereignty to forge a path that they choose to forge. I don't see that happening right now because right now the path that's being forged in Syria is not actually in the hands of Syrians.
Hmm.
It's in the hands of Turkey and Israel and the US. That's who's in charge in Syria right now, depending on which part of the country you're talking about.
Hmm.
So, and there, I think that a lot of people benefit from a weakened Syria, and that means a balkanized Syria.
Yep.
And I have to give it to Ahmed al-Sharaa. He is trying to consolidate control over the country, trying to have these negotiations with like the SDF, for example. And he's saying some of the right things, but you look at who he's put in power, and it tells a bit of a different story. I mean, when your justice minister is like on video stoning a woman,
Yep.
that doesn't, that's a bit unsettling. When
Mhm.
you're talking about being in power for the next 4 years at least without any
Yep.
elections, I'm not saying elections fix everything. I mean, this is a chaotic transition period. I'm not, I'm not naive about that. But that suggests to me that you just want to be in power forever. Like, I want to be optimistic, and generally I am an optimistic person, but even I'm looking at the situation and I'm very, very pessimistic about what the outcome is going to be. I don't think Jolani is going to have the power to keep a lid on these HTS guys who have an ideology that is eliminationist.
Mhm.
And they're going around and committing crimes against people in the countryside of Homs, for example. And using the idea of like natural acts of revenge against regime remnants to
Yep.
basically like, you know, uh, to basically like dismiss it as not important. But this is like, I mean, and this is not getting covered in the media because the media is like still, reveling in the euphoria of not having Assad in power. And look, Syria was very repressive under Assad, and I understand some of that euphoria because for the first time, people do feel like they can breathe. It was a place where you would go there and like they're not shy about how they watch you. You can't say what you think for real. You do have to be careful, and it feels very suffocating in that respect. And so that's good that that's over. But there's another kind of fear that exists in Syria now that everyone's pretending isn't there because they want to enjoy the moment. But it is there, and people are being killed. People are being kidnapped and ransomed or just disappeared. People's homes are being stolen. And people are, not everybody, but some people are frightened. And then again, I want to go back to like the Israel factor here. The Israelis have literally occupied portions of Syria, set up permanent military bases, and they are pushing further and further in, and then even using manufactured crises like they did over the weekend with the Druze and Jedamana, because there was like clashes between some like armed Syrian Druze people and the HTS guys, like kind of overblowing that and using that as we're going to go protect the Druze and Jedamana when it's like that's not, that Jedamana is right outside Damascus. Like it's like a suburb of Damascus, basically. So Syria, the Israelis are creeping their way further into Syria. And it's really dangerous because when the Israelis creep in, they don't leave. They keep it.
Yeah.
And then you have Turkey that's like calling the shots from, every aspect of governance. So in this kind of situation, this is not the ideal Syria where there's sovereignty and people get to forge the path that they want for Syria as a country. It's outside actors intervening in what the future Syria looks like. And some of their views are actually contradictory, like between the Turks and the Israelis, for example. And that could easily turn into a proxy war inside Syria between the Turks and the Israelis. And then there's the economic factor. The Americans haven't taken away the sanctions yet because they want to use them as leverage. So Syria's economy is crap. And that just creates like a pressure cooker as well, because from what I understand, since Assad fell, the electricity situation in Damascus has actually gotten worse. People can't afford anything. And it's not because Assad was doing anything fantastic. It's because Jolani came in, or Ahmed al-Sharaa came in. I'm having an identity crisis for the guy. And he immediately opened the markets up to
Mhm.
every product. And so the markets have been flooded. People don't have money in Syria. And then the Qataris were supposed to like help them give a 400% salary increase to state employees, but they actually backed out of that because they're scared of American sanctions. So people in Syria don't have money, they're incredibly poor, and they can't afford things even more than they could have before, and they have no electricity. So it's a disaster.
I mean, as you said, like balkanization, chaos is the goal here, right? I mean, if
Yeah.
you not as a Syrian, but as, like a Westerner, Western power, basically.
Yeah, there's also something a little bit interesting too, because like there's these people who really, became the PR agents of HTS. People like, there's Charles Lister, whose name I thought I'd never have to see again, but then here he is, all over everyone's Twitter feed again. But like someone like him, who's very pro-Israel, is now like glitching because because he's like, why is Israel doing this? Syria finally has a government that's not going to be a threat to them, and I'm just like giggling a little bit at that because I'm just like, did you really think that like the Israelis were just going to be okay? Like, are you insane? The Israelis are never going to be okay with like a united Syria that has power. Never, not to any of the countries that surround them. I mean, you literally have a government in Syria that has officials in it who are like, no, 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 we want to eventually normalize with the Israelis, and we're never going to fight them, we promise. And they can bomb all of our military infrastructure, and we're just going to be okay with that. And the Israelis are still like, nope, not good enough. I mean, it's horrible,
They
but
want the whole thing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Ronnie, I want to move on to Lebanon. I really want to focus on this topic just because I'm excited to talk to you about it specifically. But just for our listeners, can you give a little bit of the background on Lebanon, like the just a short history, a bridge history, if you don't mind, and then also Hezbollah's unique role in the country?
So Lebanon is a country to the north of historic Palestine, and it has a sect-based democratic system where that was imposed on Lebanon by the French and then upheld after the Civil War by the West and the Saudis, where the prime minister has to be a Sunni Muslim, the speaker of parliament is a Shia Muslim, the president is always a Christian Maronite. And there are parties that are largely based on sect, which gives, rise to like clientelism, and keeps people quite divided. It keeps Lebanon very weak, the way that the government system here is set up. And it was meant to be that way. It was meant to be a small, weak country. So before France and Britain drew borders in the region, because that's what, colonial powers do, the area was just considered Greater Syria, like Lebanon, Palestine, Syria of today, Jordan, etc. This was considered like all like Greater Syria. And then it was divided by these countries that were created by the British and the French, and Lebanon, and I believe Syria was put in the French, was basically under French rule, and Palestine and Jordan and Iraq were under British rule. And this was after like World War One. And that's when, I'm sure you guys are aware of this, that's when like the British did the mandate in Palestine, giving like, a significant chunk of it to European Jewish settlers to create a country called Israel, which is the problem we're still dealing with in the region today, right? Because it was this settler colonial entity that was implanted here that has, been a outpost for colonialism and empire, and just continues to cause problems. Where does Lebanon fit into that? Well, in terms of the Greater Israel Project, Lebanon, the south of it, is part of supposedly Greater Israel, as far as like the sort of crazy ones see it. And even the early Zionists saw it. And so there's always been an Israeli attempt to take southern Lebanon. They've repeatedly invaded it. And this is even before Hezbollah existed, by the way. Repeatedly invaded it. They occupied it for a lengthy period of time. But before I get to that, I'll also say there was an attempt by the French to create Lebanon as a Christian country. Like, just like Israel's supposed to be a Jewish state, Lebanon was ideally supposed to be a Christian Maronite, specifically Maronite state. And there are people in Lebanon who still have that dream. And those are the people who align themselves with Israel, and actually have worked and collaborated with the Israelis during the Civil War in Lebanon. So anyways, all that's to say, the Israelis have always treated southern Lebanon like their playground. And the people of the South, who were largely like farmers and peasants in the past, suffered tremendously because of that. And the South is majority Shia, though there are Christians and Druze and Sunnis in the South as well. So the Lebanese Civil War starts in the late 1970s, and depending on who you talk to, I take the interpretation because I'm a leftist, and I also the facts show it. That war was largely a war of many outside powers to basically destroy the Arab left. At least the first phase of that war. That's the reason, there was the Palestinian armed resistance was based in Lebanon, and that had to be destroyed as well. So the US and the Israelis and the French actually had right-wing fascistic proxies in Lebanon that fought on their behalf, and the leaders of those proxies are still in power in Lebanon today. That's where you get things like the Lebanese forces, headed by Samir Jaja, um, and the Tate Party as well, headed by the Jmeyev, these sorts of things. Anyway, so the first phase of the Lebanese Civil War is largely an attack on Palestinian resistance and the Arab left, and it largely, by the way, succeeds. The Palestinians end up having to leave. The armed movement left the country and went to I think Tunisia, and that's when Sabra and Shatila happened, by the way, in 1982. And then that's 1982 is also when the Israelis invaded Lebanon again, because they'd invaded it several times before that, but invaded all the way up to Beirut. And then they stayed and occupied huge parts of the south. And so there was an Israeli occupation in Lebanon from the mid 80s until 2000 when it was liberated. And the reason it was liberated is because in the 80s, after the Arab left was basically killed and Palestinian resistance was forced to leave, you had the rise of another resistance movement called Hezbollah. And that became the dominant resistance movement in Lebanon and ultimately, I would say, in the region. But what really put them on the map was the fight with Israel against the Israeli occupation until they actually kicked the Israelis out in 2000. It was the first time Arab land had literally been liberated by armed resistance in this region after so many losses. And Hezbollah only became more powerful after that because the Israelis invaded again in 2006. And there was a 33-day long bombing campaign as a result. And Hezbollah basically gave the Israelis a bloody nose. They weren't able to actually take or occupy any village, and they had to leave in humiliation and defeat. And there hadn't been a war since then. There was the war in Syria that the Hezbollah got involved with to protect their supply line in Syria and also prevent Syria from collapsing to what was seen as the biggest existential threat aside from Israel, which was ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And that's why Hezbollah got involved in that war, as well as Iran. But they hadn't had to fight the Israelis because they established deterrence in Lebanon from 2006 until October 7th, 2023, when the genocide in Gaza began. And on October 8th, Hezbollah started launching initially missiles at Israeli-occupied Lebanese land, at Israeli military bases. And then it began a tit for tat with the Israelis for about a year until it culminated into a massive, horrific, catastrophic escalation on Lebanon and a huge attempt to destroy Hezbollah, including killing its Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah and the rest of its senior leadership. But ultimately, the Israelis failed in destroying Hezbollah. It still exists. They were not able to occupy beyond a few kilometers into Lebanon. And, you could say in that sense, the Israelis lost. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily call it a win for Hezbollah because Lebanon had way higher deterrent capacity than it has now. The Israelis are staying in Lebanon and occupying several villages. And also the loss of Syria, which happened after the ceasefire in Lebanon. I mean, the loss of Syria is a really I wouldn't say nail in the coffin because there'll always be resistance in Lebanon, but it's a huge obstacle to be able to continue to fight Israel or defend against Israel in a significant and powerful way. So we're looking at various situations pre and post 2024 on Lebanon, war on Lebanon, let's call it.
Rania, I first started learning about Lebanon actually via George Galloway. He once said that if Lebanon were to have a true election, Nasrallah would be the true elected leader. This is in 2006, so just a little context there. But anyways, can you talk about how Nasrallah is viewed in the country? And I know that you said that, Lebanon is not a monolith. There's divided opinions throughout the country. But yeah, if you could just talk about how Nasrallah was viewed beyond the country, if something could even, approximate that.
I mean, I think you can look at the funeral last week to get an idea of how he's viewed in the sense that, he there was like over 1 million people that attended his funeral in a country of like around 6 million people. I think 140,000 people flew into the country for the funeral from all over the world, which is also a lot of people. This is somebody who was the not just the head of the resistance in Lebanon, he was the head of the resistance axis.
Mhm.
He was like a bigger than life figure, you know? He was in charge for so long. I mean, I don't remember a time when he wasn't in charge as like the leader of Hezbollah, the leader of the resistance. I can't remember a time when, this is somebody who, when he gave a speech, not just Lebanon stopped to listen, the world would stop to listen, both his supporters and his enemies. I mean, give me somebody else who gives a speech in the White House National Security Council, and people, millions and millions of people across the region in the Middle East, and then even across the global South are watching, especially after October 7th, but even before that. So really a larger than life kind of once in a lifetime type leader, very charismatic. And, despite the fact that he was in charge of a religious Islamist Shia, specifically organization in Lebanon, he was able to speak to the sentiments of resistance to people across sects. I mean, look, anybody who's anti-resistance hated the guy for obvious reasons. They're anti-resistance. But I mean, Christians, Druze, Sunnis, atheists who believed in the cause of resistance to Israel, to imperialism, to liberation of land in the Middle East and beyond, even if they don't connect with those identities, watched this man's speeches because they were full of really, really smart analysis about what was happening in the region, in the country, in the world. And they were educational and informative to both his base and people beyond that. And like, I think it's really powerful to be able to be in charge of basically a sectarian organization, because that's the way it's built in Lebanon, but to be able to transcend that. And to be able to have people watching you in Syria, in Iraq, in Palestine, and connecting to what you're saying, right? So we don't have that anymore. I mean, that really is a once in a lifetime kind of figure. It's like a Che, or more like a Fidel even, right? Like, or a Hugo Chavez. These kinds of people who could, speak and everybody stops to listen, and they make jokes and they're charismatic and you feel like they're speaking to you. That was Hassan Nasrallah. And I think for people in the south of Lebanon, specifically the Shia community, this war this time around was very much an attack on them as a community. They were all forced to their neighborhoods. They were displaced from their neighborhoods and their villages. They were targeted even where they would flee to. You would see these buildings get targeted in like what were considered safe areas, because here's a building of displaced people in a Christian area, which is supposed to be safe, right? But it was still demolished by an Israeli bomb. They were chased and hunted down to try to diminish support for Hezbollah from their base, but it didn't work because, again, you saw that funeral last week, and Hassan Nasrallah is dead. And that, people feel very lost because of that, but they still support resistance. And they always will. And no matter what happens in Lebanon in terms of what happens with Hezbollah moving forward, I mean, I think they'll continue to exist. They're still a very powerful organization, even if weaker than they were 2 years ago. There will always be resistance here because people are really attached to their land. They're attached to their lives, and they will fight and die for it. Like they will do it over and over again, as many times as they have to. It's just the way people are built and the way they're raised, whether we're talking about Palestine or whether we're talking about South Lebanon.
Thank you for that. That was a great answer. Rania, I want to talk before I get into the last questions, which unfortunately we have to talk a little bit about Trump, I feel like, and the Trump and Zelensky meeting. I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about Rania, if you don't mind, and that's Rania, like I said, I've been following you for what feels like forever now. And can you talk a little bit about how you got into journalism and studying the American Empire? And also, I think you were born in Lebanon, but then, like you said, I think you moved to the United States when you were quite young, right?
No, actually, I was born in the US.
Oh, you
I'm
were born
like
in the U.S. Okay,
American
right.
born and bred.
All right, all right. We'll put the flag emoji up somewhere.
Yeah, wow. I can't believe you would question my patriotism like that.
Well, I was building up to that in this whole interview. No, you talk about growing up, growing up in the Bush years as well, alongside, just getting into journalism and studying the American Empire.
So I was born into a family that was very political, that believed in, that was very anti-colonial, and it was very, much in support of resistance to empire and against Israel. So I grew up with that foundation. Like I grew up being taken to Palestine protests or whenever Israel's bombing Lebanon, going to those protests. I grew up with that conversation constantly in my household, and even in my extended family. So that definitely gave me a foundational basis to be naturally inclined to oppose US wars, to oppose Zionism. But I actually was radicalized, I would say, into leftism because I accidentally started watching Democracy Now! And the reason I accidentally started watching Democracy Now! Is because Barack Obama was running for president, against John McCain. Right? Yeah, that was the first time around. Yeah. It was John McCain, Obama.
Yeah, McCain was, yeah.
Yeah. And I was actually like, I was studying something different in college. I don't have a degree in anything related to political science or like, history or anything. I actually almost went to nursing school. But this literally, like, independent media changed the trajectory of my life. I was interested in finding out what Barack Obama's foreign policy would be because I was like, this guy's middle name is Hussein. Like, there's no way someone whose middle name is Hussein would bomb the Middle East. And there's no way someone whose middle name is Hussein would like be pro-Israel. Like, that's not possible, right?
And who studied under Edward Said?
Yes. And then I saw that and I'm like, oh my God, this guy's awesome.
Yeah.
I gotta learn more. I mean, I was very quickly disappointed, obviously, but so I was trying to find out like Obama's understanding of foreign policy, like what he might do, trying to find out his connection to Edward Said. Totally by accident, like stumble upon some video, like segment of Democracy Now! And I don't even remember what it was, but it was whatever it was. I was so like moved. I was like, oh, this is an interesting program I've literally never seen. I need to keep watching. And I just became it. I was like, it's like I went down a rabbit hole. I was just like binge watching Democracy Now! It like became a thing I did. Like it literally like altered my life. Like it's where I saw Noam Chomsky for the first time. I was like, well, I got to get that guy's book. It's like, I saw Naomi Klein on there. I was like, well, I got to read No Logo and Shock Doctrine. There was a guy who wrote a book called Lies My Teacher Told Me, who was like interviewed on Democracy Now! And I was like, that sounds so interesting. Bought that guy's book. I'm just like binge reading like all this stuff. And I was just like, oh my God. Even though like I understood war was bad and that like the media sucks and that we're lied to, I was like, we are so much more lied to than I understand. And so I like, there was like no turning back. I was like, I like have no interest in what I studied. I don't want to do this. I'm like my passion is all here. So I started a blog and like, I just started like writing. And then I eventually like sent it to places to be published. It got published. And then like, I was like, oh, I'm kind of good at this. And then actually like my stuff was doing so well. I eventually got like offered a job and I started working. I think my first job was at Alternate, which I don't even know if it exists anymore. I don't know if you remember what Alternate is.
Of course, yeah.
But and then like I like just started like freelancing for all these different lefty outlets, like In These Times and The Nation, and eventually I ended up at the Electronic Intifada, and it just kind of went from there. Like I kind of stumbled into journalism, and that's why I'm so passionate about independent media because I recognize the power of it. Like it's like people do understand that they're being lied to on some level, and they understand like everything around them super messed up, but sometimes they just like don't have the right language or background or knowledge base to know how to describe it, or to see the actual news. So like, and now there's so much more opportunity for people to stumble on like your podcast or like stumble on like the several different lefty news shows on YouTube. And I think it's so important because it literally can transform like the trajectory of people's lives.
Totally agree. And it's so interesting that you bring up Democracy Now. Ben and I, that was really, I don't want to speak for Ben totally, but we used to watch that every day, every episode, right? And I have to get your opinion on this. Until probably the first Trump administration, when they went against Julian Assange, they really wanted to start promoting
They
Russiagate.
went against Julian Assange?
Oh,
I
don't
didn't
you
know that.
remember
Oh
that?
yeah.
They had, and this
I
is,
stopped watching them before you did. I stopped watching them before you did because
I,
their transformation started before that. Anyways, go
they
ahead.
brought on,
No.
oh gosh, he's such a good, he was great. He was with Amy Goodman in Indonesia when she got shot at. And
Oh,
also
Alan
he
I
Nairn.
know. Oh,
reported,
yeah.
um, they
Alan
brought him on
Nairn.
to debate. What's his name?
Alan Nairn, isn't it?
Alan Nairn. They brought in
That sounds
Alan
Yeah.
Nairn
right.
to debate Julian Assange and basically trying,
Yeah.
Alan Nairn tried to guilt Julian Assange and say that like, you got these documents from Russia
Oh
to
God, you're
get
kidding. I
Trump
missed
elected.
this.
It's good. You don't, I mean,
Yeah.
you can't, I don't know. You think there's a floor to losing respect for people, and then it just gets lower and lower.
That's awful. That's really awful.
Yeah. Well, we all know what happened to them. That sounds like you're in alignment with us on that one. Um,
Yeah.
all right. Well, speaking of media, Rania, something I've been thinking about lately is that do you feel like under Trump versus, basically any time before this, and including Trump's first administration, there's this openness to be critical like there wasn't before. I don't even know how to articulate this question, but do you feel like media and Trump is different than anything you've ever experienced before?
Yeah, definitely. And it's because most people in mainstream media are liberals. And
Mhm.
so and so like they feel like they can challenge Trump openly. Well, also Trump is just so ridiculous. Like it's like he's so ridiculous, you'd be crazy not to challenge it. But like sometimes what they do challenge and what they're critical of is so superficial that that becomes a distraction. So I'm not sure. I go back and forth on this. I'm just like, it's not up to me who's going to be president, but like the idea of like what's better for media. I mean, during the first Trump administration, I feel like everything was just about Russiagate.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like, and that just consumed everything. So like, yeah, people were upset about like the babies in cages stuff, but that was kind of short-lived. And then it just became Russia, 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 Russia. And actually, the media became more warmongering as a result of it.
Yes.
Um, they were like upset, like he was, shaking hands with the leader of North Korea, when actually that's what, if you care about ending war, you should be doing. So I don't know. I don't think it's clear cut. I don't think it's clear cut. I mean, I do see under Democrats, the media just does go to sleep,
Yeah.
100%. But then
Hmm.
under a Republican, it's like, what are they actually challenging them on? You know what I mean? Like challenging Trump on like wanting to end the war in Ukraine. Like that should be a good thing, not a bad thing. Do I see them challenging Trump on Gaza? I don't feel like they are. I really don't. I mean, like maybe I'm wrong, but like, Trump was trying to ethnically cleanse Palestinians out of Gaza and like send them to Jordan and Egypt, and the media wouldn't even call it ethnic cleansing. Like,
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know. I don't really have like a straight answer to that question because honestly, I just feel exhausted.
Yeah.
Like,
I
I'm
mean,
exhausted.
I think that they were, again, they view him as ridiculous. That you saw the AI generated video that Trump posted.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. The pushback is odd. It's not like real pushback. It's just, oh, this guy's ridiculous. Again, I don't even have a good answer to this because I couldn't even articulate the question. But yes, I agree with what you're saying.
I
But do you
feel,
know what I mean
yeah,
by
I
feeling
feel like they're just,
exhausted? Like,
yeah. I feel like the only thing they can go after him for is like his manners and
yeah.
the way he comports himself. Because, yeah, you can't really effectively criticize him on Gaza, for example, because what the fuck was just happening over the last year under Biden. So there's no meaningful criticism of him because anything that you would criticize him of, the Democrats are just as guilty of. So they have to go after him being crude and gauche and, yeah, having gold-plated weird AI videos about the Gaza resort or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like with Trump this time around though, I don't know if you guys notice it, but I feel like the media is actually like kind of tamed a little bit in the
Mhm.
sense of the first time around it was like from day one, like Trump is just horrible. Where this time around they've tried to like they've like lessened it. Like I was even kind of surprised the way they haven't been calling him controlled by Putin, for example,
Yeah.
which I find
Yeah.
interesting. I'm not sure what the change is there. Like I know with Washington Post specifically, for example, it's just Jeff Bezos like trying to like curry favor with who he knows is in charge and stuff. But I don't know what the reasoning is for the rest of it. It just seems tamer. Like you don't have, the Rachel Maddow attitude, like you did the first time around where every day the walls were closing in.
Yes.
And like
Yeah. And the irony about that is Trump
oh,
was
it'll come back on. Electricity. Sorry.
no, no,
This is
no, all
this is
good.
Lebanon,
Yeah.
guys. We have
Um,
intermittent electricity. Go ahead.
no, it's just that the ironic thing about that is Trump, I guess, if you want to call it this, more pro-Russian in this second term already versus the extremely, in my opinion, anti-Russian moves that he made in that first administration.
Right. Yeah, it's also really, isn't it like jarring to see Marco Rubio of all people be the one to be saying the kinds of things like we're gonna do business with Russia again. I'm just like, you were like the biggest hawk ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously what's happening with this administration and the people in it is they want to fight China
Mhm.
and they feel like the best way to do that is to try to get Russia to join them in the fight against China. I don't really think that's going to work, not because Russia necessarily has principles, but like I don't think the Russians are stupid.
Right.
Like, they
Right.
could be. I don't know. They could prove me wrong, but like we'll see.
Yeah, totally.
They're not ideologically led enough in that way to want to fight China. It wouldn't be in
Well,
their
it's not
best
in their
interest at
interest.
all.
It's also
Yeah.
not in their interest. Like it would be stupid. China's right next to them. They
Mhm.
have
Hmm.
such a close and tangled relationship with China that they benefit actually more from. Um, and the US, they don't trust the US, and rightly so.
Yeah. China's a good partner. They're reliable. Why would you not be aligned with them?
Seriously. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Ronnie, the last question I have is obviously we're all anti-Trump here, I assume. Um, what do you think an ideal resistance looks like?
Depends which part of the world you're talking about.
Sure, sure. We'll keep it US based.
Yeah. All right. We'll limit it to the US. I mean, I think an ideal resistance would be opposing, Trump's obviously like extreme domestic agenda of trying to hollow everything that matters out, like the Department of Education. Um, while also opposing Trump's attempt to bully the world. And to be consistent about it. Like it's not just a Trump problem. Like this is a ruling class problem. Trump just represents a segment of it. To not see Trump as different. There is something unique about Trump for sure. He's more extreme. He has more of a mobster attitude. He's a bigger bully. Um, but his agenda is ultimately the same. It's to project and maintain American dominance over the world. And I think an ideal resistance would understand and recognize that it doesn't start and end with Trump. This is a longer, ongoing fight for against this like horrific dictatorship that we have in the US that we think is democracy but isn't. Um, so yeah, because I think the problem becomes like seeing it as a Trump problem means if Trump finishes his term and a Democrat gets elected, we're good. It's fine now. We got rid of Trump. And it's like, no, this is part of a broader problem. It represents a shift that is super important. I also think an ideal resistance would, I don't know, like avoid getting distracted by stupid things as well. Um, and an ideal resistance would also not police itself to the point where like you have people scared to align themselves with, the Palestinian right to violently defend themselves. That's another thing too. I'm not saying that has to be at the forefront of every part of resistance to Trump in the US. I understand there's really important domestic things that need to happen to oppose Trump in terms of what he's doing, with immigrants and what he's doing, especially economically, like taking over the Treasury Department and like trying to limit any aid anybody gets at any time, anywhere. Impoverished people in the US who are already at the margins even more. All of these things are super important. Attacking, various communities for their identities. Like these are very, very important things. But also like I just get rid of the liberalism. The liberalism is where we go to die. And stop, oh my God, most importantly, stop putting our faith in democratic leadership for anything. They are not an opposition party. Like we have to be building outside of the Democratic Party and operating outside of the Democratic Party. You want to try to pressure it, you want to try to influence it, fine. But they are not our friends. They are part of the problem, and they are the reason Trump is in charge right now.
That was our interview with Rania. Wow. Loved it. Love Rania. She's so cool. Really, really inspirational. Hope you all enjoyed the interview. Let us know what you thought in the comments.
Can I get one gut reaction from you guys?
Yeah.
Of course.
I was on the White House Twitter today, just kind of scrolling, seeing what they were putting out, and I stumbled upon this retweet.
Designating English as the official language of the United States. Executive order. Executive order alert. Exclamation point.
English is
America
now
is
the
so
official
back.
language of the United States. Yeah. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I guess, put out a bill to like make this permanent. It reminded me of what you said about Zelensky passing that essentially for Ukraine.
The right wing has been trying to do this forever. I remember people would talk about this back like when we were in high school for the George W. Bush years. I don't know. I mean, what is it other than a way to like hate on Mexicans?
That's it.
It's fucking stupid. And again, just I don't know. All these people bitching about cancel culture, we talk about this a lot, but this is just yet another example of them proving our point that they are whiny little girls who want to have their safe spaces in the same way. This would change nothing. Like, I mean, if you want to talk about like the morals of it or whatever, I don't know if that would be the right word. I mean, like if you want to talk about like the American values of it, obviously American values have changed, but like it flies in the face of the whole like American story. The whole point of America is it's the nation of immigrants. Everybody's welcome. It's the great melting pot. Obviously, everyone wants to get rid of that. We're white enough, and now we want it to be ours. They want it to be England, basically, or France.
Yeah.
They want, they want this white identity. It's so fucking stupid.
You bring up the melting pot, and I heard this argument for one interpretation of the melting pot is, yes, everyone comes here and they melt down and then they form into America. And it's like, that's a weird bastardization of like the idea of mixing.
That's become like I mentioned, fucking Sagar and Jetty's bitch ass, who is so annoying, and I think we should try and start a Twitter beef with him. But like he talks about that all the time. His family. He's of Indian descent. I think he's like first generation, and him and like Vivek Ramaswamy also have that. Like they're not the only ones. There's also a lot of white examples of it, but like that is the conservative line. Is that you can come from wherever if you are worthy, but then the trade-off is you come to America and then you become fucking white Anglo-Saxon. Like I don't know. That's like that does feel like a fairly new thing. That obviously people have thought that forever, but it's very out in the open now. It's like, oh, okay, we're the melting pot, but it's you come here and you become us.
And
also professional sauce.
Yeah, and also Britain has this conversation all the time. And it's like, oh, even if you're like fourth generation Indian British, you're not fully British because you're not fucking white and ugly as shit, right? So you even have like Suella Braverman saying, well, I'm not like full English, even though she's born here and her parents, moved here and everything. So it's nothing but just really racist. There's nothing to say about it. It's not even coded. It's not even a dog. People overuse dog whistle. This isn't a dog whistle. It's just straight up being a bigot.
Yeah, racism with more steps. It's like a more, I don't know, like wrapped in nationalism, I guess. Like racism wrapped in. It's like just a more complex version of racism, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I think it's but it's weird because America doesn't really have that history to fall back on. Britain does, but Britain was also a massive imperial power that itself became a melting pot by like sending their troops and absorbing cultures from all around the world through trade and whatnot. France is weird. They were also an imperial power, but they still definitely have this nationalist, like you come here and you learn our language.
Yeah, assimilation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you cannot become a citizen unless you can speak fluent French.
That's probably true.
Unless you like marry into
Um,
or some other steps, but I think they really, really want you to.
I mean, it sounds like the executive order will have
no.
zero impact, as I think you said.
No, I think
However, I
it's
mean, the
like
fact
those
that it's is
manuals.
even shared by the
It's
fact
an
that it's
it's a
being
go-
moved forward by the
it
White House, but yeah, I agree with you, Ben. It's just like straightforward bigotry. It's
it's similar to
offensive, I guess.
it's again it's an owning the libs thing. It's Gulf of America.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
that's the
meaningless. Also,
policy.
the thing is, who actually cares? It's not gonna change how people talk. It's not like you're like outlawing Spanish or whatever.
This is
Like,
like setting the
but you
federal
have to.
minimum wage, I think.
And
It's like it's only going to affect federal things. And it's like at the DMV, everything has to be in
yeah,
English, like mandatory. You
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
provide all
yeah.
materials in
Actually,
but that
I
already
hadn't
fucking
thought of
happens.
that. That's an issue. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
True. It's just going to be more roadblocks for that. But like, I mean, I don't know. This country, you know, it already makes it hard enough for people who aren't English speakers.
I
So
wish you
maybe
said
it can be more
American,
of that. But
designating American as the official language of the United States,
Yeah,
and then having like an official American dictionary with like y'all.
yeah.
yeah, actually, that's a
I've been
good
wanting that for
point.
a long time, anyways.
So we're gonna go W or L. I'm gonna say that's an L because if you're calling it English, you're still subservient to the crown. Total
Hmm.
bitch
Yeah,
move.
didn't go all the way.
They didn't think about that. Breaking: notorious war hawk John Bolton is calling for Secretary of State Marco Rubio to resign after yesterday's
Yeah.
Zelensky meeting. What was his role? Was he wasn't Secretary of State, but he was something high
No,
up.
he was a national security advisor.
Okay.
I can't remember what Dan, what was he in the Bush administration?
I think he was the ambassador to the UN.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, he was. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Magoo.
It's really crazy that like such a comical looking man is maybe the most bloodthirsty human being on earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that guy is sexually attracted to nuclear war.
Did you know
Like,
that he was actually he was in Reagan, and then he was also in the State Department from George H.W. through
Oh yeah.
Clinton. Yeah.
This
oh
dude
yeah,
for
He's really
sure
the
is a
epitome of
Reaganite.
the swamp, honestly.
Yeah.
yeah, he is the
He's
herpes
the
of the swamp. I don't know why we still have to keep hearing from him.
Yeah. Did you
Of
know
all
that?
Why do
people to
you why do
criticize,
you
why
think he,
Rubio
I feel
is
like
the
it's because he
Secretary of
doesn't
State?
want
Because
to
he
nuke
respects
Russia.
Rubio. Yeah.
Oh, what'd you say, Ben?
What I got from it was he was mad that America doesn't want to go to war with Russia.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, probably. Rubio didn't say a word in that meeting, I don't think.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
He was
John
there.
Bolton's just mad.
He was
Yeah,
there.
Yeah.
Bolton's just mad that Rubio didn't like scream at the top of his lungs, "Nuke him! Kill him!"
Yeah.
I need to
Uh,
rewatch the Kubrick movie. Um,
2001.
no,
Or no,
no, the
Strangelove.
Cold
Yeah,
War, Strangelove. Yeah, it's been a
yeah.
No,
while.
the one that has to do with nukes, Dan. Fucking idiot.
Yeah.
You dumb fuck.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's funny that I don't know why he keeps getting platformed because, like, I know what he's gonna say.
Yeah.
He's gonna say we
The
need to.
talk track doesn't change.
He just wants to go to war with everybody.
He's the new
Yeah, I mean
Democratic base.
he's worse than yeah. He's worse than
That's why they had him, yeah.
he's worse than Lindsey Graham. He seems more
Yes.
unhinged.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well, because Lindsey Graham still has to toe the line a little bit.
Yeah.
He's up for like re-election every 6 years,
Yeah.
so
Well, and Lindsay is a fruity fancy man who.
I'll do
Hey
the
y'all.
player.
Hey y'all, I don't like all these immigrants coming in here.
Where are my fellow alphas at?
I like
Um,
Andrew Tate. I think he's real based.
uh,
Very strong young man, too.
Are we gonna have a department of like masculinity at some point and put Andrew Tate and his brother?
I
yeah.
think
They want to
I
bring
think Lindsey Graham
UFC
should run it.
All right, y'all, that was Villain for All Seasons, Season 2, Episode 7. Great hanging out here with the boys. Bye, boys. I'm Lindsay. Be sure y'all listen next time. It's a real fun show. You can find it on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on YouTube. Probably on Rumble soon. It's the best place for free speech, which we know is under attack, y'all. Make sure y'all like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.
Keep it well,